This man was convicted of slaughtering 7 individuals, including his own children. He still had the audacity to blow a kiss at the camera, as if nothing had happened. That eerie moment alone cements him as one of the most cold-blooded mass murderers in New Zealand's history, and his name is Raymond Wahia Ratima, a man whose actions shook the peaceful town of Masterton, where people had believed they were safe. At that time, Masterton was a small, close-knit community celebrated for its rural charm. Situated in the Wairarapa region, the town was encircled by green farmland and rolling hills, creating a serene landscape. The local economy primarily relied on agriculture, particularly sheep farming, which was a leading industry. Many residents were employed in farming or related sectors, such as wool processing, small manufacturing, and retail. Life there moved at a slow and predictable pace. Violent crime was uncommon. Beneath the seemingly pleasant exterior, however, economic difficulties were beginning to emerge. In the early 1990s, New Zealand was dealing with the consequences of economic reforms from the previous decade. Many families, especially those in working-class areas like Masterton, were feeling the strain of increasing unemployment and financial insecurity. Job opportunities were limited, wages were low, and support from welfare programs was often insufficient. For someone like Ratima, who was already struggling to support his family, these challenges only heightened his frustration and desperation. At 25, Ratima and his wife, Toni, were overwhelmed by financial stress, making it difficult to keep up with rising rent costs. With 3 young children to care for, they had to move in with Toni's parents on Judd Street in Masterton. Living with extended family was challenging, the house was cramped, tensions were high. Arguments became more common, emotions flared, and resentment grew. Over the months, his frustration intensified, driven not only by financial difficulties but also by a sense of powerlessness and rejection as he watched his life fall apart. He sought help from social services in hopes of finding support and a way to recover, but the assistance he needed never materialized. Left alone with his despair, his feelings transformed into a deep, violent rage. By June, Ratima's marriage had completely collapsed. A serious conflict involving Ratima, his wife, and her family marked the final breaking point. He was expelled from their home, feeling rejected and isolated, with nowhere to turn for help. As he struggled with insomnia, wandered alone, consumed by anger and hopelessness, he reached a terrifying conclusion: if he couldn't have his family, then no one else would. On the night of June 26, 1992, Toni went out to meet her parents, Philip and Tubby Ferguson, at a local pub, leaving her 3 young sons, Karipi, Barney, and Stacy, with her sister, Nicola, 20. Also present in the house were Toni's brother, Philip Ferguson Jr., 14, Mikola's partner, Bevan Tepu, 21, and their young son, Stephen, 3. That night, Raymond Ratima returned home armed with a knife and a softball bat. He violently attacked everyone inside, killing 7 people through stabbing and bludgeoning. Tragically, his own children were among the victims. In a disturbing move, he placed their bodies on his wife's bed and covered them with a Bible, as if seeking forgiveness. The bodies of the adults were also piled together in another bedroom, creating a horrifying scene that was difficult to comprehend. But Ratima's bloodlust was not yet satisfied. He sat in the house, waiting for Toni and her parents to return so he could finish what he had started. When they finally walked through the door, the nightmare continued. Nicola's father, Philip, was the first to be attacked. Ratima swung the softball bat with full force, striking him in a brutal assault. This time, however, things did not go according to plan. In the chaos, Toni managed to escape, running for her life to call for help. When the police arrived, the carnage they witnessed would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Blood soaked the floors, and lifeless bodies filled the rooms. In the midst of it all was Raymond Ratima, subdued, and he was no longer in control. Toni's father, Philip, had overpowered him, preventing a greater tragedy. The news of the massacre spread like wildfire. New Zealand had never seen such a horrifying crime. A father, a husband, a son-in-law, someone who was supposed to protect his family, had instead wiped them out in cold blood. The community of Masterton was left reeling, struggling to understand how something so monstrous could have happened in their quiet town. Ratima was arrested at the scene and taken into custody. His initial demeanor was eerily calm, as if he had accepted his fate. He offered little resistance, making no attempt to flee. During questioning, he showed minimal emotion, providing cold, matter-of-fact responses. Investigators were disturbed by his apparent lack of remorse. When Ratima stood trial in 1993, the nation watched in shock. He expressed remorse, but the sheer brutality of his crimes left many wondering if it was genuine or merely an attempt to save himself from the harshest punishment. During the trial, the prosecution painted a picture of a man who had allowed his rage and feelings of inadequacy to fester for too long. The defense, on the other hand, argued that Ratima had been pushed to his breaking point due to financial strain and rejection by his wife's family. Mental health professionals were brought in to assess his state of mind, but ultimately, the jury saw through any justifications. The judge described the killings as unimaginable. Ratima was sentenced to life imprisonment for 7 counts of murder. Additionally, he was given 10 years for the killing of an unborn child and another 7 years for attempted murder. Even behind bars, the horror of what he had done did not fade. The parole board repeatedly denied his bids for release, citing his continued struggles with banned substance abuse. In 2008, the board noted that despite presenting himself as a reformed man in previous hearings, Ratima had relapsed into cannabis use, blaming his actions on a dark day in his past. Year after year, Ratima has stood before the parole board pleading for his release. He insists that he has changed, that he has grown, and that he is no longer the man he was when he committed those horrific crimes. Yet, each time, the board has denied his requests, stating the same concerns: his psychological state, his risk to society, and his lack of true remorse. It has now been more than 30 years since Ratima was sentenced, and despite numerous parole hearings, the board remains unconvinced that he is fit to re-enter the world outside prison walls. Ratima has been denied parole not just once or twice, but a total of 14 times. His repeated attempts to gain freedom have been met with the same result. His lawyer, Roger Eagles, has now taken a different approach, claiming that there is potential bias in the parole process. Eagles argues that one of the parole board members, Professor Phil Brynd, had previously prepared psychological reports on Ratima in 1992, and his involvement in the current parole decisions could create an unfair assessment. He points out that Brynd is the only person on the board who has had extensive personal interaction with Ratima, which could lead to preconceived judgments rather than an objective evaluation of Ratima's progress over the past 3 decades. The legal challenge does not stop there. Eagles has also argued that Ratima's repeated parole denials are evidence of bias. He claims that despite Ratima undergoing rehabilitation programs and counseling, the board has never granted him a single opportunity for conditional release, raising concerns about whether he is being treated unfairly compared to other prisoners with similar convictions. However, the parole board has maintained its stance, insisting that every hearing is based on up-to-date psychological evaluations and risk assessments rather than relying on reports from the past. They argue that Ratima's continued imprisonment is not the result of bias but rather the outcome of his failure to meet the necessary criteria for release. Another point of contention in Ratima's case is the way his parole hearings have been conducted. Eagles has argued that previous hearings have gone off track, with the board focusing too much on questioning Ratima about his motivations for the crimes and the impact on his victims. He claims that the discussions have shifted from evaluating whether Ratima is fit for release to revisiting his past, which should not be the central focus of the hearings. Eagles contends that while it is understandable for the board to consider the severity of Ratima's crimes, parole decisions should be based on his rehabilitation and risk factors in the present, rather than continuously re-examining the past. In 2021, it was revealed that Ratima had begun a relationship with a woman who had suffered childhood trauma. The board expressed concerns about this relationship, fearing that it could trigger another violent episode given Ratima's history and the emotional volatility that played a role in his past actions. The board was deeply troubled by this revelation and questioned whether Ratima was capable of forming healthy relationships, or if this new connection was a sign of unresolved psychological issues. Despite attending nearly 100 sessions with a psychologist, board members still believed Ratima lacked insight into his crimes, which made them skeptical of his ability to maintain a stable and responsible relationship outside of prison. The concern was not just about Ratima himself, but also about the potential harm that could come to his partner if he were released without proper safeguards in place. During one of his parole hearings, Ratima made a statement that only reinforced the board's concerns. He claimed that he had loved his children and believed he was putting them in a better place by taking their lives. This statement sent chills down the spines of the parole board members, as it suggested that Ratima still harbored a distorted sense of justification for his actions, rather than fully accepting the gravity of his crimes. His words implied that he had once rationalized these actions as an act of mercy. The board saw this as a major red flag, indicating that Ratima had not yet reached a true understanding of his past actions or the level of self-awareness and accountability required for parole consideration. Despite these concerns, reports from inside the prison indicate that Ratima has generally maintained good behavior. He has been described as respectful within the prison environment, and there have been positive reports about his work while incarcerated. Additionally, corrections officials have stated that there is no further need for additional rehabilitation programs, as Ratima has already completed the necessary courses. However, even with these positive notes, the parole board has remained firm in its decision to keep him behind bars, stating that good behavior in a controlled environment does not necessarily translate to safe behavior in the outside world. In his most recent parole hearing in 2024, Ratima made a significant admission. For the first time in over 3 decades, he acknowledged that the killings were intentional. This directly contradicted his previous claims. While this confession marked a departure from his earlier statements, it still failed to provide clarity on the most crucial question: why? Despite finally admitting his intent, Ratima refused to explain his motives. During the hearing, he expressed deep regret, stating, "I was a very selfish man for what I did. All I can say is that I really regret wholeheartedly the decision that I made in order to kill all those many children and adults. I hate myself for what I've done." However, the parole board remained skeptical. They pointed out that his changing narrative over the years only raised further concerns about his credibility. Given his history of inconsistent explanations, the board questioned whether this newfound admission was genuine or simply another attempt to manipulate the system in his favor. The victims' families continue to oppose his release, maintaining that Ratima has never fully explained his actions or shown true remorse to them. His admissions mean little without an honest, clear acknowledgement of why he did what he did. Many still believe that Ratima poses a danger to society and should never be granted parole. In response to these concerns, the board recommended that Ratima be transferred to a special treatment unit for violent offenders. However, he resisted the move, arguing that it would be a step backward in his rehabilitation rather than a constructive measure. Despite his efforts, the parole board once again denied Ratima's release. The ruling made it clear that while his latest statement represented a shift, it was not enough to justify granting him freedom. The board emphasized that public safety remained their top priority and that Ratima's risk factors had not diminished to a satisfactory level. For now, Raymond Wahia Ratima remains in prison, and his next parole eligibility will come in April 2025. Whether he will finally succeed in persuading the board remains uncertain. However, given his long history of denied applications, changing statements, and ongoing concerns from the victims' families, his path to release remains as difficult as ever. The sudden disappearance of 27-year-old Kelly sent shockwaves through her loved ones when she failed to show up for work on October 12, 2013. Her colleagues tried to reach her, but her phone was silent. Normally, Kelly was very active on social media, so this was alarming. She never let her phone out of her sight before. Concerned, her loved ones contacted the police and filed a missing persons report. Detect launched an investigation that uncovered several intriguing details, and the story grew more complicated with each discovery. Kelly DWI was born in 1986 in Lincolnshire, a suburb of Chicago, into a loving family. In 2002, when Kelly was 16 years old, her parents decided to divorce but maintained a friendly relationship for her benefit. The divorce was a traumatic event that significantly impacted Kelly's life. A year later, she graduated from high school without a clear direction for her future. Opting to take a break before heading to college, she worked part-time at a restaurant. By 2008, at the age of 22, Kelly decided to make a bold move and relocated to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a city about an hour away from Chicago that reminded her of home. Milwaukee is the largest city in Wisconsin by population and offered great opportunities. Kelly quickly adapted. She made new friends, attended college, and took a job as a yoga coach to cover tuition and housing expenses. She also worked occasionally as a nanny to manage financial challenges. Kelly enjoyed exploring all the trendy and interesting places in the city. She relished life and harbored big aspirations for the future. The last time she saw her father was about a month before she vanished. He visited Milwaukee to see his daughter. At that time, Kelly had already graduated and was working as both a yoga trainer and a sales clerk at a sports store. Her coworkers held her in high regard for her fun-loving and upbeat personality. They genuinely liked her. By all appearances, Kelly seemed happy and content with her life right up until her sudden disappearance. Kelly loved her job and had been in relationship with Chris Zach for a year. Chris Zach, a 38-year-old, was a successful IT at a trucking company. He had graduated from Boston University with a degree in international back in 2009. For his career, he relocated from New York City to Milwaukee. Chris was known as a hard-working and decent individual with a good family. Just like Kelly, he enjoyed sports and entertainment. Together, they seemed to make an excellent pair. By that time, Chris had already established a successful career, owned a luxurious apartment, drove an expensive car, and accumulated significant wealth on his own. Kelly's father liked Chris and believed he was well-suited for her. During the investigation into Kelly's disappearance, detectives found no evidence of enemies or individuals wishing her harm. All her personal belongings were left at home, which ruled out the possibility of her running away voluntarily. What alarmed the authorities was the absence of any activity on her bank accounts and phone, leading officers to believe she might be in trouble. The last person to see Kelly on October 10, 2013, was her boyfriend, Chris. Investigators invited him to the station for questioning. Chris stated that they met at his luxury apartment in Lafayette Towers and spent some time there before heading to a small bar across the street around 8 p.m. There, they socialized with others and had drinks. Cheerfully, they returned to his apartment by about 2:30 a.m., went to bed soon after. By 9 a.m., Kelly left the apartment and they never saw each other again. Chris stressed that he did not consider Kelly as his girlfriend. As per him, they had an open relationship and he was genuinely in love with another woman with whom he envisioned his future. This revelation made investigators suspicious, despite Chris's story appearing plausible on the surface. Detectives decided to scrutinize him further. They interviewed friends who were with the couple that night to gather more insights. They confirmed they had an enjoyable time together, starting at the bar, then moving outdoors. Hungry, they ordered a pizza and ate it right on a bench. Kelly was in good spirits and shared her for the next day, which happened to be her day off. She intended to catch up on sleep, practice yoga, do laundry, and rest. Chris and Kelly later headed home. Shortly after, a friend came over for another drink upon their invitation. This friend felt uncomfortable being in Chris's apartment. After having a few drinks, she sensed tension within the couple and decided to leave. She mentioned that Chris was smoking and chatting with her that night, while Kelly seemed rather sad. The girl assumed Kelly was just tired and chose not to bother them further, excusing herself from the apartment. Upon conversing candidly with Kelly's other girlfriends, the investigator discovered that things were not as smooth as they appeared between Chris and Kelly. While Kelly was genuinely in love with him, Chris didn't seem equally invested in the relationship. He wasn't making any joint plans with her for their future, which distressed Kelly. Kelly suspected that Chris was involved in an affair and foresaw an impending breakup. Consequently, she began exploring other options by registering on a dating site and corresponding with different men online without meeting them in person, hoping to normalize relations with Chris. Her friends disclosed that they noticed bruises on Kelly's arms and neck, but whenever they questioned her about it, Kelly deflected by joking about having had a crazy night and changed the subject immediately. They harbored suspicions of possible violence, but Kelly never confirmed these suspicions. By then, the CCTV footage from Chris's house had been analyzed. It showed the couple returning drunk to the apartment at night. However, there was no evidence of Kelly leaving afterward. This contradicted Chris's claim that Kelly left his home at 9 a.m. the next morning. It turned out another friend of Chris's had been at the apartment that evening. This friend reported using illegal substances with Chris. Based on this information, detectives obtained a search warrant for the apartment and went to Chris's residence. Inside, they discovered various substances, pills, pipes, and other items, and arrested Chris for possession. The detectives also noted an unusual detail: a torn curtain in the bathroom. The hooks that held it were damaged, as if the curtain had been ripped off by force. During interrogation, Chris remained calm and confirmed he had taken substances, but denied distributing them. The police accessed Chris's cell phone and found alarming materials. There were photos of a girl, naked and unconscious on his bed, as well as a video showing him raping the unconscious girl and seemingly strangling her. Suspicions arose that Chris was drugging the girl to become intimate with her. These materials were entered into evidence concerning Kelly's disappearance. Subsequently, the police returned to Chris's apartment with a dog trained to detect dead bodies. The dog responded to both the bed and bathroom in Chris's apartment, then indicated interest at the front door. The dog later led law enforcement officers to Chris's car in the parking lot and pointed towards garbage cans. By this point, investigators were certain the missing person was deceased, making Chris the prime suspect in Kelly's case. Evidence suggested Kelly spent her last moments in his apartment before he transported her body elsewhere by car. However, it remained unclear how he managed to move her body undetected by any of the 28 CCTV cameras present. While continuing their investigation, police examined Chris's computer and found explicit images involving minors. Consequently, he faced charges for possession of these materials. At that point, Chris was out on bail pending trial as investigators continued seeking evidence and Kelly's body to file charges against him effectively. After recalling what Chris had mentioned about another girl he was dating secretly, detectives began investigating the suspect's double life. It turned out that this girl's name was Megan, and they had been seeing each other for approximately 3 years. However, Megan was unaware of Kelly's presence in Chris's life. The detectives approached Megan and showed her photographs of Chris's apartment. As she examined the images, Megan noticed that several items were missing. They lacked a shower curtain, a rug, and several towels. The bedroom was missing a large golf bag that was always kept there. Based on the description, detectives hypothesized that Kelly's body could have fit inside such a bag. After scrutinizing all entrances and exits within the building, the police deduced that Chris had one alternate route to reach his car without being seen. It appeared he had premeditated this route, studying the house well in advance. Parking lot camera footage revealed Chris arriving with a large bag that he stored in the trunk of his car. Chris departed from his residence at 10:06 a.m. on October 11th. At exactly 10:08 a.m., Kelly's phone was permanently disconnected at the same location. Over the succeeding 8 hours, footage captured Chris making multiple trips to and from the house while loading items into his car. He finally left for good at 6:16 p.m., not returning until the next day. When interrogated by investigators concerning his activities, Chris claimed he was transferring his summer sports equipment to his mother's house. However, no one found this statement credible around 7:30 p.m. on that same day. Chris had planned to meet Megan, but arrived over an hour late. Detectives speculated that during this time, he was likely searching for an appropriate location to dispose of Kelly's body, thus causing his delay. Unfortunately, tracking his movements throughout the day posed difficulties since he had turned off his phone earlier that morning. Being an experienced IT professional, Chris likely understood that keeping his phone active would facilitate easy tracking through phone billing information. According to Megan's testimony, Chris was not himself that night. He seemed agitated and nervous. He started fiddling with his phone, claiming it wasn't working, which he said was the reason for his lateness. After the date, they headed to Megan's apartment, where they spent the night. Throughout ordeal, Chris appeared so stressed out that he didn't sleep a wink and sweated profusely to the point where she even had to change the sheets the morning. Investigators speculated that his anxiety was due to not yet having disposed of Kelly's body, which was in his trunk. Fear of exposure loomed large. Chris was evidently trying to figure out where he could hide the remains. On the morning of October 12th, he said goodbye to Megan and left. But before leaving, he tried to convince her to move with him urgently to another city, Denver, but she refused. Police officers were able to track where Chris went using his car's GPS. It led them to a place called Cheese House, a cheese store located 130 kilometers from Milwaukee. But why would Chris need to drive that far early in the morning for cheese? Obviously, that's not why he headed there. However, Chris claimed he bought a piece of cheese there for his parents and even had a receipt for the 9:55 a.m. purchase on October 12th. His parents confirmed that he brought them cheese. Yet it was hard for investigators to believe this, because similar cheese could easily be bought at a regular supermarket near his house. The police suspected this area might be where he disposed of Kelly's body. Further inquiries revealed that on his way back, Chris stopped at a sports store and bought new sneakers a little past noon, a detail that raised eyebrows. Detectives believed this stop wasn't accidental. They theorized that Chris decided to discard an old pair of shoes, which might have had drops of blood, or leave footprints at the site where Kelly's remains could be found, thus leading investigators back to him. It appeared meticulously planned, as he methodically got rid of all evidence while creating an alibi for himself. The suspect had a sharp mind and aimed to execute the perfect crime. However, investigators were able to convict him of falsehoods. The distance between the cheese store and the sports store was approximately 80 kilometers, a trip he would typically complete in about an hour. Yet, he appeared at the store more than 2 hours later. Delay suggested that for another hour, he was engaged in something else, likely hiding the body. The theory was that he had found a place along the way to dispose of the bag. Police were on the hunt for the body, but lacked a specific location, making their search challenging and inconclusive. The possible search area covered the entire 80 kilometers route, a scenario akin to looking for a needle in a haystack. Meanwhile, in November 2014, Chris Zoka faced trial for possession of illegal substances and explicit child photos. He pleaded guilty and received a sentence of 19 years in prison. This was already significant for Milwaukee police, as they managed to imprison such a dangerous individual. Concurrently, the roadside search persisted. At one point, success came when human remains were discovered by a local resident taking a walk in a wooded area about 60 kilometers from the city. Dental records later identified these remains as Kelly DWIs. The local resident immediately reported this grim discovery to the sheriff's office. The authorities quickly presumed these were Kelly's remains, whose whereabouts they had sought for so long. This find finally concluded the search for their daughter for Kelly's parents, who had known no peace for over a year and a half. Now it was imperative to seek justice for her by establishing the precise cause of death. From the skeleton alone, determining this cause was impossible. The medical examiner suggested that Kelly might have been strangled. However, since there was no significant pressure applied, her hyoid bone remained unbroken. There wasn't any evidence at the site where her body was found, not even remnants like torn curtains or towels or any bags, leaving many questions unanswered. The position of the body was highly unusual. The skeleton was discovered face down, with one arm positioned beneath the torso, and the legs bent as if confined for a prolonged period post-mortem. This suggested Kelly had indeed been hidden in that golf bag. Chris was captured on his house cameras with that same bag, driving down the road and seemingly disposing of the body. However, all evidence was circumstantial. No direct proof implicated Chris. The detectives continued their investigation methodically, as their suspect was already in jail. Ultimately, Chris wasn't charged until 5 years after Kelly's disappearance. The charges were negligent homicide and hiding the body. The police couldn't prove premeditation. They surmised that on that night, events unfolded similarly to what investigators observed in the video. Chris got intimate with Kelly, lost control during strangulation, and killed her. Following this unintended act, he removed the bathroom curtain, rug and towels to wrap her body carefully before cleaning the house thoroughly and concealing the body in a bag. Chris maintained his innocence throughout the trial. The prosecution presented CCTV footage and cell phone recordings depicting the strangulation. Additionally, a canine inspection of his apartment corroborated incriminating findings. Megan testified against him, noting his unusual nervousness on that day and tardiness for a meeting. Chris's ex-girlfriends also testified at the trial, describing his troubling interest in choking and rough sex which frightened them. Meanwhile, the defense argued that there was no direct evidence linking him to Kelly's murder. The whole case leaned heavily on guesswork and speculation. Despite these allegations, Chris had no prior arrests or convictions other than a substance possession story. He was an accomplished IT professional with a reputable career and family life, appearing incapable of such an act. Additionally, it emerged during trial not all CCTV footage had been preserved fully beforehand. This lack of comprehensive evidence added further complications to establishing a clear narrative around what precisely transpired. The prosecution couldn't definitively prove that the deceased hadn't exited the house. The defense even brought a witness to trial who claimed he saw a girl resembling Kelly the weekend after she vanished. This witness had seen her on TV as a missing person, but wasn't absolutely certain it was Kelly. This gave the defense an opening to propose that Kelly had indeed left Chris's apartment and subsequently encountered one of her new online dates. Regarding the dog search, the defense argued there's no way to confirm what exactly alerted the dog, as there was no videotape. Hence, it relies solely on the police officer's interpretation, which could be subjective. However, the prosecution countered by stating that the dog experiment was carried out as objectively as possible in front of numerous police officers who all concurred with its results. Moreover, they suggested the witness likely saw another girl in that car, because by then Kelly had ceased all communication, no answers to calls or messages, and inactive social media, which was uncharacteristic of her. Thus, they asserted Kelly must have been dead by that time. The prosecutor convinced the jury that Chris orchestrated her murder meticulously and eliminated evidence so thoroughly they couldn't directly link him to it. Despite this, after lengthy deliberation, the jury found him guilty of first-degree negligent homicide and concealing a body. The victim's family and prosecution pushed for the harshest sentence of 48 years imprisonment. The defense sought a reduced sentence of 22 years. Ultimately, in December 2018, 43-year-old Chris Zaka received a 31-year prison sentence, 26 years for manslaughter and 5 for hiding the body. Currently housed at Green Bay Correctional Facility in Wisconsin, Chris Zaka will be eligible for parole in 2065 when he turns 90 years old. He expressed dissatisfaction with his sentence and attempted an appeal which was denied. The deceased's family is satisfied with what amounts to a life sentence for him. On March 19, 2014, an emergency call was made to the police in Guamuchil, located in the state of Sinaloa, Mexico. The caller's voice was broken and pleading for help for his daughter. Officers rushed to a house in the Las Fuentes area. When they arrived, they saw the front doors wide open. Inside, upstairs, they found a man and his younger daughter, who was about 10 years, both crying inconsolably. The man led the police to a room where they found the lifeless body of a 16-year-old girl with over 60 wounds. This tragic news spread quickly through the city and shocked its residents. Nobody could comprehend who could take the life of such a young girl. Anel Baez Alvarez was born on March 17, 1998, in Guamuchil, Sinaloa. She was the second child of Idalia Alvarez and Hugo Baez. Her older brother was Omar. Later, they were joined by their younger sibling, Aid. During her childhood, Anel faced no particular problems. Although initially reserved, she grew to be self-assured with grace and charm. Her father worked as a tailor, and the family enjoyed prosperity and closeness. However, this happiness ended when Anel's mother was diagnosed with cancer in the early 2010s. The children had to mature quickly to care for her. Following a tough battle with illness, Idalia passed away in 2012. The family was devastated but did not waver. They supported each other through grief and tried to make life as comfortable as possible. The tragedy brought Anel closer to her sister. They shared everything, both sadness and difficulties, together. Despite these challenges, Anel remained cheerful and friendly with a passion for dancing and music. As she transitioned to high school, she emerged as an ideal daughter, managing household chores, looking after her younger sister, and maintaining good grades. One of her favorite activities was cooking for her family. Her desserts were especially popular. Anel also overcame shyness and became one of the most well-liked girls in school. She even formed a musical group where she took on the role of a singer, developing a fondness for the ballad Amor Eterno. Around the same time, Anel met someone who would become her best friend, at least for a while. Her name was Andy Elizabeth Gutierrez. They became an inseparable duo, drawing admiration from everyone around and being considered the most popular girls in school. They their bond through social media posts. On October 14, 2012, Anel uploaded a photo with Andy expressing her joy about their friendship. She expressed gratitude to God for the opportunity to be close to her, and even wrote that Andy had become not just a friend, but a sister to her. For a while, everything was wonderful, but over time, things changed. Despite being the same age, their personalities turned out to be completely different. Anel was a sweet girl who loved love songs and spending time with her family. Meanwhile, Andy lived in an unstable environment and became increasingly involved in what was known as narco culture. This urban community was also known in Mexico as buchona. Andy was consistently present at events featuring musicians of this kind, such as the concert of the band Caliber 50 during the closing of the carnival celebrations in Guamuchil in 2014. The girl also held very clear political stances. On one occasion, she shared on her social media that she participated in a march supporting Joaquin El Chapo Guzman Loera. On her social media page, she wrote, "March for the liberation of El Chapo. We must join this great cause," which was accompanied by a photo. Unlike her friend, Anel typically didn't express her ideology on social media and didn't share the views supported by Andy. As a result, the distance between them grew larger. In 2014, both entered Guamuchil High School at the Autonomous University of Sinaloa, but hardly communicated with each other. Each created her own group of friends. Anel started hanging out with Melissa, Karim Manuel, and Maria Jose, friends who led similar lifestyles to hers and followed her everywhere and admired her deeply. Maria Jose, who had known Anel since elementary school, considered Anel the mother of their entire group and assumed this role, always taking care of everyone. Despite maintaining a polite and orderly demeanor, she kept her distance from Randy and never informed her father or siblings about their dispute. Around this time, Randy's social media behavior became erratic. On her page, she started posting negative and troubling messages. For instance, some posts were highly alarming, mentioning things like pregnant 13-year-old girls and year-old girls taking active substances. Other posts were quite disturbing, such as, "My mom is upset that I killed my ex and buried him in my garden," or, "Lucky the living dead she is envied." Initially, these posts seemed nonsensical. Randy often drew them from forums or songs. However, over time, her messages began to take on a more threatening tone. On February 5th, 2014, she wrote, "I'm going to bury you by the end of this year." Then, on February 23rd of the same month, she posted, "I may seem very calm, but in my head I've killed you at least 3 times. And in the end, my mind is filled with new ideas every day." A few days later, Randy wrote, "Thank God no one hears my thoughts and everything will definitely happen tomorrow." The unsettling messages continued to appear with increasing frequency. On March 3rd, she posted, "Maybe not now and not tomorrow, but soon. I assure you I won't tell her anything then, but know that I have already mentally destroyed you." The last post was dated March 16th. She wrote, "This seriously drives me to despair." No one within her social circle knew who the threats were aimed at. However, rumors began circulating at school. Many speculated that Randy was upset with Annelle because they were no longer friends. Some even accused Randy of being jealous of Annelle since everyone adored her. Despite this turmoil, Annelle appeared unfazed by what Randy was posting on social media. Annelle celebrated her birthday with a large party where she wore a beautiful pink dress and was undoubtedly the star of the evening. Everything in her life seemed perfect until her unexpected absence on March 19th raised concerns among her family. Hugo received a call from the school attended by his younger daughter, informing him that Annelle had not come to pick her up as usual. Initially, Hugo wasn't overly concerned. He thought Annelle might have overslept or was with friends. After school, he went to pick up his daughter. The way, Hugo decided to call Annelle to ensure everything was okay, but she didn't answer. He assumed she was still sleeping. After picking his daughter, Hugo tried to contact Annelle again. She didn't respond. He repeatedly called her number with no success, and his worry deepened. Hugo headed home in the Los Fuentes area. Upon arriving, he noticed that the front door was wide open. Entering the main living room, father and daughter saw that some items had been moved. They thought it might have been a robbery. They shouted Annelle's name and searched for her throughout the house. She did not respond and couldn't be found anywhere. Finally, Hugo reached her room. He tried to open the door, but it was locked, raising his concern further. He knocked several times without getting a response from Annelle. Hugo then broke down the door. What he saw took his breath away. Annelle's lifeless body lay on the floor with numerous wounds and blood stains around her. He immediately called the police, who soon arrived at the scene. Seeing the crime scene, officers initially thought that a very strong person or group had committed the crime. Although there were blood stains in the room, they were minimal. It was evident someone had tried to clean them up. Later during the autopsy, the forensic expert determined that Annelle had sustained 65 stab wounds in total. Officers were convinced that this attack was carried out by someone harboring strong hatred toward her. Moreover, since neither doors nor windows were forced open, detectives believed Annelle knew her assailant and let them into the house willingly. They speculated she might have arranged to meet with this person that day. However, upon checking her mobile phone, they found nothing suggesting such an arrangement. No invitations or planned visits were evident on her phone records. Initially, Hugo wasn't too concerned. He figured Annelle might have overslept or was with friends. After school, he went to pick up his daughter. The way, Hugo decided to call Annelle just to check in, but there was no answer. Thought she might still be sleeping. After picking up his daughter, he tried contacting Annelle again, but there was still no response. Hugo called repeatedly with no success. His concern grew. Heading home to their place in Los Fuentes, he noticed the front door was wide open. Inside, some items had been moved around. It looked like a robbery might have taken place. Father and daughter started calling out for Annelle and searched the house frantically. There was no response from her, and she wasn't anywhere to be found. When Hugo reached her room, he found the door locked, which raised his alarm even more. He knocked several times without any reply. Eventually, Hugo broke down the door. What he saw left him breathless. Annelle's lifeless body lay on the floor with multiple wounds and bloodstains nearby. He immediately called the police, who arrived promptly at the scene. Observing the crime scene initially led officers to think that someone very strong, or possibly a group, had committed the crime. Although there were blood stains in the room, minimal ones, it appeared that an attempt had been made to clean them up. Later during the autopsy, a forensic expert determined that Anel had sustained 65 stab wounds. Officers began believing that someone with intense hatred towards her carried out the attack. There were no signs of forced entry. Doors and windows remained intact, suggesting that Anel knew her assailant and let them in willingly. They even speculated whether she had arranged to meet someone that day. However, upon checking her mobile phone records, they found nothing indicating an invite to anyone to her home that day. It appeared to be a random encounter since there were no surveillance cameras in the vicinity. Officers decided to interview the neighbors. A few of them reported seeing a slender girl with black hair leaving the house. These statements helped narrow down the pool of suspects, and investigators were no longer looking for a man or a group of people. Following this, officers began questioning Anel's close circle. All relatives had solid alibis, asserting that the girl had no enemies, was very friendly, and they couldn't imagine anyone wishing her harm. However, detectives took an interest in a post on Randy's social media in which she expressed shock at Anel's death. Some people conveyed their condolences, but others started pointing fingers at Randy as the murderer. They flooded the post with comments accusing her and claiming she was guilty of the crime. Randy deleted her account, but it was already too late. Police called several of Anel's friends to ask about the connection between the two girls. All of them mentioned that they had grown apart, and it was evident that Randy envied Anel because she was more popular. After these interviews, detectives visited Randy's social media profiles and found numerous threatening posts she had written a few months earlier. But that wasn't all. Just hours after Anel's death, Randy wrote, "I'm a fool. Oh my God, what have I done?" Although these posts lacked context, everything pointed to Randy as the primary suspect in the crime. This information was kept confidential because officers feared she might flee before they could apprehend her. The agents patiently waited for the right moment. The case drew so much attention that hundreds of people gathered at a well-known funeral home in Guamumuil to bid farewell to Anel. Friends, relatives, teachers, and classmates cried and embraced each other, unable to believe such a young girl had left life behind. Despite the large crowd, two people stood out with their presence. As soon as the girls entered the room, they began chatting and eating ice cream. A few minutes later, Andy suggested watching a movie. She then mentioned she was going to the bathroom, asked them not to pause the movie. However, instead of going to the bathroom, Andy went downstairs to the kitchen. She picked up a sharp knife and returned to the room, concealing it under her clothes. She noticed that Nell was lying on the bed with her back to the door. Seizing this opportunity, Andy took out the knife and started attacking her. Nell attempted to defend herself by scratching, pushing and punching, but couldn't overpower Andy. Nell lost too much blood and eventually fell lifeless to the floor, becoming a victim of a heinous crime. Andy began showing signs of impatience, aware that she needed to act quickly as Nell's family would return home soon. She used all available rags to try cleaning up the blood, but could only manage to wipe away part of it due to its large amount. Eventually, she went to the bathroom, washed her hands, and put on clothes taken from Nell's wardrobe. Afterward, she closed the door to the room, leaving her best friend's body inside, and ran out of the house, leaving the front door ajar. When Anel's relatives heard this account, they became furious. They knew that the story about the photograph was a lie. Anel was not capable of such an act. It didn't align with her character. Furthermore, Anel's friends claimed they had never seen that photograph before. They noted that since both girls were so popular, it would have been impossible for such a photo not to have spread, and someone would have surely downloaded it by now. All signs pointed toward envy as being the actual motive for this crime. However, at this point in time, motive no longer mattered because Andy had become the sole suspect in this crime and was officially charged with involuntary manslaughter. The legal proceedings moved swiftly. 4 officers escorted Andy into juvenile court proceedings at prosecutors' offices specializing in cases involving minors. After an hour-and-a-half hearing session took place, Andy was found guilty. Although it was clear that she had devised a premeditated plan and the murder was intentional, given that she was 6 years old, she received sentence of 7 years imprisonment. She was transferred to the juvenile detention center in Kakan, and Nell's family believed justice had been achieved and thought was done. However, they were gravely mistaken. The defense filed an appeal, arguing that the trial took place in Kakan, which was incorrect since the crime occurred within Los Mochis' jurisdiction. The higher court decided to reopen the trial, this time in the proper jurisdiction. Despite the swift process, the verdict remained unchanged. This decision sparked widespread outrage among the public. Hundreds of Mexicans and foreigners shared images on social media with posters calling for justice for Anel. Several polls were conducted with over 5 million users believing Aren's sentence was unjust. Many felt she deserved a much longer prison term. The trial took place again, and once more, the girl received a 7-year imprisonment sentence. Hugo addressed journalists expressing his dissatisfaction. He appreciated that the sentence wasn't reduced, but felt Randy's age shouldn't have shielded her from a longer term. He hoped she would at least serve the full sentence, but even that didn't happen. On July 6, 2016, her sentence got reduced to 5 years of imprisonment. Moreover, it was also decided at this hearing that with good behavior, she could be released earlier. State police officers had to close the courthouse gates as numerous journalists wanted photographs of her. This case became one of the most high-profile in the country. Hugo wasn't informed about this hearing, which caused him significant outrage, and from this point onward, circumstances became even worse. On Friday, September 23, 2017, another hearing analyzed Ari's behavior in connection with reforms in federal juvenile justice law. The girl was released after serving only 3.5 years out of her initial sentence. Leaving court, Hugo expressed extreme dissatisfaction. He felt he had witnessed a great injustice. He regretted that legislative reforms appeared to benefit offenders rather than victims. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Bodhisattva Potter. This is a story about 2 lovers who met in school and wanted to spend all their free time together, believing their love would last forever. However, they were unaware of how brutally their happiness could be shattered by an unexpected tragedy. Bodhisattva Potter was born in 1991 in Newport Beach, California, to Rick Potter and Scherzer. Bodhisattva also has an older brother named Zen. At the time of Bodhisattva and Zen's birth, both parents were in their 30s, and soon after, the family experienced significant career growth. Scherzer is a psychologist who specializes in working with autistic children. Her husband is a psychotherapist and also provides medical consultation. From a young age, Bodhisattva was very intelligent and kind. She was humble and maintained good relationships with everyone around her. All her teachers recognized her intellectual talent. Bodhisattva was also passionate about sports, especially gymnastics and basketball, and she pursued these hobbies and won several awards for her achievements. She also played the piano and sang. Her parents divorced in 1998. At the time, Bodhisattva was 8 years old and living in Newport Beach with her mother and brother. They moved to Hollandale, California, a small desert town with a population of just 6,000, about 2 hours away from their old home. Hollandale is an isolated community with a strong sense of community, with 2 large lakes that make it feel like an oasis in the desert. The town has about 2,000 homes and a well-developed sports and recreation infrastructure, making it feel like a small resort. Bodhisattva was accepted into the Lewis Center, an academy whose curriculum prepares students for entry into top universities. At this time, Zen moved back in with his father, and Bodhisattva stayed with his mother. Despite the distance, the two brothers often spent weekends and holidays together. Initially, Bodhisattva and her mother rented a house. In 2004, when she was 12 years old, her mother bought a plot of land near a lake to build her dream home. Bodhisattva was actively involved in the design of the new house, but the construction process took longer than expected due to high costs, so they continued to live in the rented house during this time. On Bodhisattva's 13th birthday, she gradually became more mature. She began to seek independence. Her mother recognized this change and allowed her daughter more freedom. Over time, Bodhisattva became interested in Hollywood and dreamed of becoming a film producer. By 2007, she was in high school and began dating Christopher Cody Thompson, her first love. They were a perfect match, sharing many interests in film, psychology, and architecture, and they enjoyed exploring abandoned buildings together. Cody, born in 1989 in Victorville, California, is 2 years older than Bodhisattva. He has two older sisters, Sarah and Katie. Cody is a young man passionate about nature and cycling, and he enjoys restoring custom bikes with his father. At the time he met Bodhisattva, Cody had been working as a teaching assistant for 2 years. People generally describe him as friendly and outgoing. Scherzer was surprised to find out that her daughter had a boyfriend. She felt that it was too early for her daughter to start a relationship and was prepared to intervene if necessary. However, as a psychologist, she realized that she needed to accompany her daughter. She understood that her daughter was growing up and that this journey could not be controlled by restrictions alone. Initially, she considered Cody to be a bit rude, which made her feel uncomfortable. However, as they began to communicate, they found common ground. The Scherzer soon realized that her initial judgment about Cody was wrong. He turned out to be a good person. She felt more secure about her daughter's relationship. Cody graduated from high school and began working for the family business, which helped him become financially independent. He was able to support himself and even buy his own car. He has a passion for exploring old buildings, so he scheduled a visit to an old military bunker that had been repurposed and is now open to the public. Initially, the place attracted many adventure lovers. Over time, it became a popular place for teenage parties. However, the place was not safe. The bunker was often used by addicts to do drugs, and people also came here to practice shooting for themselves. Despite these risks, Cody still wanted to visit because of its uniqueness. Many of his friends knew about it but disapproved of his hobby. However, Cody was attracted to the place and liked the feeling of being in a secret location. In December 2007, after turning 18, Cody planned to take his 16-year-old girlfriend, Bodhi, to the bunker to show her the place they both loved for exploring abandoned sites. Excited by the idea, Bodhi invited her mother to join them. Her mother, Scherzer, objected to the idea. She was shocked by the plans the couple had made. Scherzer warned that the place could be dangerous and forbade Bodhisattva from going there. Although Bodhisattva understood her mother's concerns, her rebellious teenage spirit got the better of her. She did not fully understand the dangers of the place. Despite her mother's warnings, she was determined to explore the bunker. In January 2008, Scherzer was in Newport on business. While her mother was away, Bodhisattva had a few days free to do whatever she wanted. She decided to take the opportunity to visit the shelter. At the time, Cody had planned to take 30 people from the school to the abandoned shelter in the woods. To get to the abandoned building, she asked her friend Andrew to drive her there. He picked Bodhisattva up from home and drove her there on the evening of Friday, January 4, 2008. Bodhisattva hid her intentions from her mother and brother. She told her brother that she was going to see their mother, while she assured her mother that she would stay home with her brother. Bodhisattva was clever enough to make her story sound believable, and her family believed her. On the evening of January 4th, when she and Andrew arrived at the bunker, several cars were there, including those of Cody and his friends. Everyone was enjoying the music and having a good time. Their group was quite large, making them feel safe. The teens explored the empty bunker and had fun until about 4 a.m. When everyone started to leave, Cody and Bodhisattva decided to stay and sleep overnight in his car under the stars, taking advantage of the time when their mother was not there. Bodhisattva and Cody fell asleep until Cody received a call from one of his friends. The friend had lost his iPad, but Cody found it in a car and promised to return it at their next meeting. After the call, Cody went back to sleep and did not contact anyone again. Around 4:30 a.m., Scherzer woke up with a sharp pain in her chest, feeling as if she had been stabbed. She felt worried about her daughter, but decided to wait until 6:30 to call Bodhisattva. It was their family's habit to start the day with a short conversation to ask how everyone was doing. However, when Scherzer called, Bodhisattva did not answer. Scherzer tried to call her daughter, but the call was unsuccessful. She then contacted Zen and discovered Bodhisattva's lie. Zen thought her sister was with their mother, while the mother believed Bodhisattva was with Zen. They discovered that Bodhisattva had gone with Andrew, who had picked her up from home and had taken her somewhere, leaving her family worried and angry. Scherzer also tried to contact Andrew, but was unsuccessful. Scherzer, who was in another city at the time, decided to contact the police. At that time, Bodhisattva had not been reached for about 10 hours, but the police explained that it was not enough time to officially classify her as missing. The police initially thought that Bodhisattva had simply run away or gone out with friends. Meanwhile, her mother felt helpless because she was far away. Scherzer's worries grew when she called Cody's mother, who had also not seen her son since the night before and was extremely worried. They began contacting all of their son's friends and discovered that the two had attended a party at an abandoned bunker the night before, and no one had heard from them since. This was Bodhisattva's mother's worst nightmare, as she considered the location to be one of the dangerous. Zen and his friends quickly arrived at the location and found Cody's car parked outside an abandoned building. Both the driver's and passenger doors were wide open, which added to their worries as there was no one inside. Zen and his friends grabbed flashlights and entered the building. The search continued for several hours, with them splitting up and searching different areas of the bunker. Eventually, one of the friends discovered Cody in a room of the abandoned building. He showed no signs of life. The most alarming detail was that Cody was missing an eye. And Bodhisattva was still missing. Zen immediately called 911 to report the incident. Around 3 p.m. that day, Cody's mother received a call informing her that her son had been shot. Upon hearing this, Bodhisattva's mother was extremely panicked, although she still held on to a faint hope that her daughter was alive. She then quickly went to the shelter to look for her daughter. Meanwhile, the police were on their way to the scene, but the journey took a long time. When the police arrived, they searched the bunker area, and some police were outside to question those who had witnessed the incident. The bunker was complex and confusing, like a maze. Inside, it was so dark that even the light of a few lanterns could not help the police gather information. The teenagers who found Cody's body helped the police locate him. He had a serious gunshot wound to the head, which caused him to lose an eye and eventually die. Cody's body was removed from the bunker, but the search did not end there. Because it was so dark inside, the police had to wait for generators and lights to be installed inside the bunker. Later, near where Cody's body was found, police also discovered Bodhisattva's body in the hallway. She had suffered gunshot wounds to the chest and head. There were no signs of rape. The weapon used was determined to be a handgun. Both victims had multiple wounds to their bodies. Unfortunately, there were no surveillance cameras inside the shelter. Police began questioning everyone who was at the party that night, hoping that someone might have seen something unusual. This information could be crucial in solving the case. None of the victims' belongings had been stolen, not even the iPad had been left in the car. There were no signs of sexual assault or struggle. Police were piecing together what might have happened on the night of the murder. After Cody's final phone call, the attackers forced the young couple out of the car and took them to a dark shelter, where they were shot one by one. It appears that Bodhisattva tried to escape but was caught at the end of the hallway and shot. The shocking murders of Bodhisattva and Cody caused widespread public outrage. Such a dangerous military site was easily accessible. It was not fenced, locked, or monitored. As a result, a debate arose over the demolition of the abandoned building. During the investigation, police learned that several years earlier, a young man had encountered a group of dangerous men in the area. The men were clean-shaven and acted aggressively, suggesting they were members of the same gang. However, the men were never seen again after that encounter. In their investigation, the police focused on a call made by a friend to Cody at 4:30 a.m., when Cody was still alive. Bodhisattva's mother then attempted to reach her daughter at 6:30 a.m. but was unable to make contact. This timeline indicates that the tragic events leading to the double murder occurred between these two calls, starting after 4:30 a.m. A large amount of evidence was collected at the crime scene. Forensic scientists had to analyze thousands of fingerprints and hundreds of spent cartridges, as well as a large amount of trash in the abandoned building, to determine what was related to the case. In addition, the victims' computers were confiscated for valuable information. Police believe that Cody and Bodhisattva may have had an argument with someone, leading to the attack. During questioning, some friends who attended the party recalled that 3 strangers entered the basement. These strangers, aged 17 to 18, arrived in a Honda Odyssey van around midnight and asked to join the party. They were allowed to stay and brought alcohol to share. Cody's group thought they were normal teenagers and didn't suspect anything unusual. However, none of Cody's friends could remember when the strangers left the party. On January 13th, the police received a crucial tip from Sean, an informant. He revealed that his friend, David Smith, had called him on the night of the murders, inviting Sean to a bunker for shooting practice. Sean declined the invitation. A few days later, David contacted him again, sounding very concerned. Sean asked David about recent events, and Sean received a vague answer that alluded to a serious crime. This led Sean to suspect that David might be involved in the double murder at the bunker, so he reported his concerns to the police. Police later interviewed a key witness, who identified David Smith as a 19-year-old from Limestone, about an hour and a half from Holy Dale. On the night of the murder, David and his friends Colin McLaughlin, 18, and Cameron Thompson, 16, had set out for a fun night out that turned deadly. They drove Cameron's mother's SUV into the desert, where they stumbled upon a bunker party. The teens gathered there became their targets, leading to the tragic events that unfolded. In 2007, David, a former high school track and field athlete, lost his athletic scholarship to the University of California, Riverside after a disagreement with the head coach. Unable to pay for college, he was expelled and moved in with his friend Cameron, who then introduced him to Colin. The three quickly became close friends, but their aggressive behavior scared the local residents. The 3 criminals were arrested on January 17th. But all 3 denied any involvement in the crime. During a police search of their home, the police found the murder weapon. In addition, blood was found on clothing and shoes, and tests confirmed that the blood belonged to Bodhisattva and Cody, who were murdered. Friends who were present at the bunker that night identified the attackers as strangers who had brought alcohol to the party. All of the teens came from troubled families. Colin's father was a police officer, which gave them access to the weapon used in the murder. Colin, considered the ringleader of the group, had struggled with mental health issues since he was 5 years old. By the age of 17, Colin had attended 7 different schools and had spent some time in an adult detention center. He had significant difficulties adapting socially, which were made worse by his use of alcohol and drugs. During the investigation, many witnesses reported his troubling behavior. Colin even confided in friends that he had thoughts of killing. When he was angry or had an argument with his parents, he would often threaten to kill them. As Colin entered his teens, many people began to fear him, especially when he started talking about mass murder online. During a search of Colin's belongings, police discovered evidence that he had a history of violence. Colin had repeatedly threatened to kill others, including writing detailed notes about shooting up classmates. While in school, he was evaluated by a psychiatrist and diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and he was put on medication. At age 16, Colin faced court charges for attempting to build an explosive device, a year before he killed Bodhisattva and Cody. He was placed in juvenile detention and, upon his release, was placed on probation for several months. Prior to the killings, he had stopped taking his bipolar medication. The suspects, Colin McLaughlin, Cameron Thompson, and David Smith, have not confessed to the crime. However, during pre-trial hearings, Colin was identified as the primary perpetrator of the murder and was released on $2 million bail. He faces a potential prison sentence of 111 years. In contrast, David Smith's bail was set at $1 million and he faces up to 81 years in prison for his involvement in the crime. In February 2009, the prosecutor's office announced its intention to pursue the death penalty against Colin, while David and Cameron were likely to receive life sentences. The defense argued that Colin, who suffers from bipolar disorder, should receive treatment instead of being detained or executed. As a result, a psychological evaluation was ordered. In 2010, 2 forensic psychiatrists evaluated Colin and determined that he was mentally sound and aware of his actions at the time of the crime, meaning he was sane and competent to stand trial. Bodhisattva's mother Scherzer believed that the killer should not be executed. She felt that the appropriate punishment would be imprisonment for all 3 criminals so that they could understand the severity of their actions. The case took a long time to resolve, lasting more than 4 years due to discussions about the evidence and the ages of the criminals. It was eventually decided to try the criminals as adults. In 2011, Cameron Thompson reached a deal with the prosecution. He pleaded guilty to manslaughter and attempted robbery. He agreed to testify against his 2 friends. Cameron explained that the 3 of them had planned to rob a car in the desert, but when they arrived, they found no one there. Instead, they stumbled upon a party in a nearby bunker. Initially, they asked to join and gained the trust of the teenagers at the party. But there were too many people and they realized that this was not the right time to strike. They decided to wait until most of the teens had left before attacking anyone. The criminals hid in a truck, armed with guns, and were not detected by Cody. When the couple fell asleep in the truck, the criminals sprang into action. They forced the sleeping couple out of the truck at gunpoint and took them to a dark, secluded area of the bunker. There, they forced the couple to their knees, and Cody was shot execution style. Bodhisattva tried to escape but was caught and shot by Colin. They then returned to Cody and shot him again. Unfortunately for the criminals, the couple had no valuables, so the robbery was unsuccessful. They then left the bunker and went home. As part of the deal, Cameron was sentenced to life in prison. Although he had the right to apply for parole, his request was denied and he remains in custody. Colin also accepted a plea deal. Colin remained mostly calm throughout the trial. However, there were instances where he laughed, stuck out his tongue, or acted defiantly, suggesting underlying mental health issues. As a result, Colin was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. In 2016, David Smith, a third defendant, also reached a deal. For his cooperation with police, he was sentenced to 50 years in prison and was eligible for parole after 12 years. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Linda Cooney. On June 28, 2011, at approximately 8:30 a.m., Linda Cooney called the Las Vegas police. She was in a panic, reporting that her son Kevin had been shot in the neck and needed immediate help. When police and an ambulance arrived at their home, they found Kevin Cooney, 30, lying on the living room floor, bleeding. They quickly provided him with medical assistance. When the police arrived at the crime scene, they found several unusual details. Ammunition and weapons were scattered across the floor, which was not typical. They determined that the Kevin had been shot with Linda's pistol, but she could not identify who fired the weapon. There were no signs of forced entry into the house, and nothing appeared to be stolen, so they ruled out robbery as a motive. Linda was 63 years old at the time. She remained calm during the police interrogation. The interrogation lasted about an hour and was recorded. Linda insisted that she did not know who shot her son and denied any involvement, despite pressure from the police. When the police arrived, Kevin only had time to say that the shooting was an accident before he lost consciousness. He was rushed to the nearest medical center. Fortunately, Kevin survived, but his condition was serious and he would need a long time to recover. Linda's interrogation is ongoing. Police believe Kevin may have wanted to end his life. When Linda was questioned about this, she stated that he had tried to do so before. This situation required further investigation, and it was later revealed that there were more disturbing details involved in the case. During the investigation, it was discovered that a similar tragic shooting had occurred in the family 19 years earlier. Linda reported that Kevin had gone through a troubled adolescence, which had worsened after the death of his father. She informed the police that Kevin had repeatedly threatened to end his life. Even as an adult, Kevin continued to exhibit unstable behavior. Linda recounted an incident just hours before the shooting, at approximately 1 a.m. on June 28, 2011, when Kevin attacked her after an argument. He suddenly turned a corner and struck her in the chest, knocking her to the floor. She showed the police a large bruise as evidence of the attack, saying that Kevin had expressed a desire to kill her. After the fight, Linda went to bed. At the time, only Linda and Kevin were home, as her youngest son was away on a business trip. The conflict with Kevin began because of his relationship with a girl named Karina Taylor. Linda described Kevin as emotionally unstable and Karina as unpredictable, which led to frequent arguments. She said that these conflicts were common and that she was used to them. The next morning, Linda woke up and went to the kitchen to get a glass of water. In the living room, she found Kevin lying on the floor with a gunshot wound. He was still alive. However, strangely, Linda said that she did not hear the gunshot. Experienced police sensed deception from the start. It appeared that Linda was trying to conceal what happened that night. She was careful with her words, while the Kevin was unconscious and there were no other witnesses for the police. So they decided to test the only piece of evidence, a .357 Magnum pistol used in the shooting. They knew the gun belonged to Linda. What is even more astonishing is that 10 years ago, Kevin's father, Jim, was shot with this gun in Palm Beach, Florida. Police investigated the case and learned that Linda had been acquitted of murdering her husband, after which Linda tried to reclaim the gun, claiming that she needed it for self-defense. She eventually succeeded in getting it back. The police try to find some similarities between Jim's and Kevin's cases that might support the idea that Linda tried to kill her son. They may even consider re-examining the first crime. Meanwhile, the police talk to family members. Jim's brother, Bob, believes that Linda intentionally shot both cases. He never trusted Linda, but there was nothing he could do to protect his family from harm. Bob was the eldest child in a wealthy and large family. As Jim grew up, he became a successful lawyer and made a good living. The family originally came from Palm Beach, while Linda was from the Midwest, where her parents owned a small family farm in Wisconsin. Jim and Linda met at a party, and after a brief encounter, he fell in love with her beautiful brunette. However, Bob is skeptical about Linda. He finds it strange that she works as a secretary at a law firm and is involved in questionable activities. That Jim was deeply in love with her, so he ignored his family's objections and married Linda in 1979. Together, they went on to have 2 sons. Linda had 2 children, Kevin, born in 1981, and Christopher, born later. However, their marriage was not a happy one. Linda accused her husband, Jim, of being abusive. Over time, their relationship deteriorated, leading Linda to report Jim to the police for assault. However, she was unable to produce any evidence or testimony to support her claims. There were no obvious signs of abuse, and many people found it hard to believe that someone as respected and decent as Jim could harm his wife. After facing accusations that damaged his reputation, Jim decided to file for divorce. After the divorce, the children continued to live with Linda in Jim's large house, while Jim had to pay child support. However, Linda was still unhappy and tried to get more money out of Jim. Meanwhile, Jim wanted to spend more time with the children, but if he did not pay her in advance, the children would not be home when he visited. According to Bob, each visit cost Jim $500, a large sum at the time. Jim became increasingly frustrated when he realized that Linda was taking advantage of the situation and blackmailing him. Jim, an attorney, chose to follow the law. On February 7, 1992, he visited his children, not with cash as he had done before, but by court order. The court ruled that Linda had to allow the children to communicate with their father. Unfortunately, during this visit, Linda shot him, resulting in his tragic death. Family members believe that she was angry that he refused to provide financial support because she had previously relied on her ex-husband while not working. In a fit of rage, she shot Jim and then called the police to report the incident. When the police arrived, they found Jim lying on his back in a pool of blood. He was holding a kitchen knife in his right hand, and he had died from multiple gunshot wounds. Linda shot her ex-husband at close range but claimed it was self-defense. She stated that Jim attacked her with a knife, leaving her no option but to shoot him. However, police were doubtful because Linda had no injuries at all. There wasn't a single scratch on her body. This led to questions about whether Jim had actually attacked her and what his motive might have been. In the end, Linda's account was not believed, and she was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The key witness in the case was her son, Kevin Cooney, who witnessed the murder of his father. He was called in to testify. On that tragic day, younger brother, 8-year-old Christopher, was hiding in a closet and couldn't see the events unfold. Kevin, however, was in the bedroom with the door open to the kitchen, where his parents were arguing. He watched through. He looked through the crack in the door. Kevin remembered feeling terrified and anxious. He was frozen in place, unable to move, when he saw what had happened. Kevin reported that before the shooting started, he saw his father holding a shiny object, but he couldn't identify it clearly. He thought it looked like a knife, but it might have also been a key or something similar. After the shooting, when he left the room, he noticed his father no longer had anything in his hand. It was only after the shooting ended that a knife appeared in his father's hand. When the police arrived, they suspected Linda had staged a self-defense scenario by placing the knife in Jim's hand. Linda had a strong motive for this action because her husband's sons would inherit his money upon his death. Her children would benefit from Jim Cooney's life insurance policy, worth $1 million, which, along with his considerable estate, would be passed on to his children. However, the most compelling evidence the police uncovered was not Linda's call to the police, but her phone records. They discovered that before calling 911, she had contacted her lawyer first, possibly to seek legal advice. During the 9-to-1 conversation, Linda made several verbal errors, possibly due to confusion. She asked for backup and claimed that her ex-husband was trying to stab her, despite having previously said that she had shot him and that he appeared to be dead. The police were certain that Jim was dead before she called her lawyer, and she only contacted the police afterwards. It is also feared that, before her arrest, Linda had convinced Kevin that the knife had been in his father's possession the entire time. During the trial, Kevin testified that he saw an object in his father's hands. In 1993, 11-year-old Kevin took the stand as a witness. He spoke with a stutter due to fear and held a small toy. Although his testimony was somewhat confusing, it was convincing enough for the jury to quickly acquit Linda Cooney, leading to her release from the courtroom. Clearly, Kevin's testimony played a crucial role in her defense. Afterwards, she gave an interview to numerous media outlets, describing her ex-husband as a typical abuser. She maintained that she was not a murderer but acted in self-defense. To protect herself and her children, some people supported her. However, most Palm Beach residents who knew Linda's family did not believe her explanation. Because of Jim's calm and non-confrontational nature, the locals looked down on her and assumed she was the murderer. As a result, Linda could not stay there long due to the public backlash and the potential for conflict. After receiving financial support, she packed her children and moved to Las Vegas. She wanted to start a new life somewhere where no one would recognize her. 2 decades later, the heartbreaking incident occurred again. It involved the same .357 Magnum pistol that was used to shoot the family's father, Jim. Kevin Cooney is now recovering in the hospital. Initially, he was unconscious and partially paralyzed. He was unable to provide a clear account of the events of that tragic night. When Kevin woke up in the hospital 3 days later, his first words were, "No, Mom, I'm afraid of Mom." Mom shot on. He immediately told several nurses about this and seemed genuinely scared. It was clear he feared that his mother would come back to harm him again. His statements were serious, indicating that he was not joking. Kevin's girlfriend, Karina Taylor, was not surprised by his words. She said she lived in fear of his mother during their 2-year relationship. Their relationship began in 2009. Karina stated that Kevin had a constant fear of his mother, who reacted harshly whenever he had a girlfriend. Linda had previously frightened off all of Kevin's girlfriends, but Karina was determined and not intimidated by Kevin's mother's angry expressions. From their initial interactions, Karina developed a negative view of Linda, finding her to be erratic and aggressive. Linda bluntly tells Karina that Karina's family will never accept her and advises her to stay away from Kevin. And Linda ominously implies that she always carries a gun for self-defense. This makes Karina realize that it is best not to confront Linda, causing her to secretly meet Kevin out of fear for her safety. Kevin's previous girlfriends share similar concerns. 1. Clarita Candle believes Kevin's mother is a serious threat, as Linda has threatened her life. Kevin often finds himself caught in the middle, desperately trying to protect his relationships, which are constantly sabotaged by his mother's behavior. Kevin really wants a future with family and children. But at the age of 30, his mother disapproves of his wishes. One day, his ex-girlfriend Clarita receives an unexpected call from Linda, who has found out her phone number. Linda rudely begins to interrogate Clarita about her life, using vulgar language and accusing her of only being after Kevin's money. This confrontation escalates into a series of unpleasant encounters, where Linda openly insults and threatens Clarita. Although Kevin and Clarita's relationship is short-lived, Clarita constantly feels uncomfortable and believes that Linda is stalking her. Eventually, the stress becomes too much, and she decides to break up with Kevin to find peace. Linda's plan to keep Kevin away from the girls worked for a long time, but it didn't work with Karina Taylor. Kevin and Karina's relationship grew stronger, and he wanted to build a life with her. He decided to leave his mother and move in with Karina, sharing their plans on social media. When Linda found out, she started spreading rumors and even contacted Karina at her work. Kevin wanted to make things right with Linda, and Karina believed he tried to do so the night he was shot. Kevin could not stand his mother's control, so he announced that he was leaving. However, she refused to let him go and used a weapon. She went down from the second floor and shot him in the neck. Police determined that Linda used a .357 caliber gun, the same gun used in Jim's murder. Police discovered that, once again, Linda did not immediately call the police. She waited about 15 minutes before seeking help while Kevin was on the verge of death. Phone records show that she first called her second son, Christopher, who was not nearby. The investigation concluded that Linda was guilty of attempting to murder her son. She was arrested and charged with the crime. On April 8, 2014, Linda went on trial. It had been more than 20 years since she first killed her husband. This time, the trial was held in Las Vegas, where she was charged with attempting to murder Kevin. During the trial, his younger brother Christopher, influenced by his mother, believed that his brother was responsible for the situation. He described Kevin as a very cruel person, often violent at home and often arguing with his mother. During the call, Linda informed Christopher that Kevin had attacked her by hitting her and threatening to kill her. In response, she retrieved a loaded pistol that she kept in the living room for self-defense. She intended to use it to protect herself and stop Kevin, but he took the gun from her. While he was armed, Kevin accidentally shot himself. The defense attempted to present this as an accident, but this was inconsistent with Linda's initial statement, in which she claimed that she did not see who fired the shot, and Kevin also claimed that his mother shot him. During the trial, the prosecution presented testimony from 2 girls, one former girlfriend and one current girlfriend of Kevin, as well as 4 nurses who had contact with him during his hospital stay. All of them confirmed that Linda shot him. In addition to their statements, there was considerable physical evidence, including fingerprints found on the weapon. For months after the shooting that left Kevin paralyzed, he was able to testify in court, but he altered his original story. He now claimed that there had been an argument between them that night, insisting that he attacked Linda first. The Kevin did not hold Linda responsible for the incident, referring to it as self-defense or an accident. He had expressed similar sentiments when speaking to the police at the hospital. It seemed he was worried about not surviving, so he wanted to ensure his mother wouldn't go to prison after he passed away. Kevin loved his mother deeply and continued to protect her, but this did not alter the reality that there had been reports of arguments and domestic violence coming from their home for several years. Kevin's message, originally seen as a warning to his girlfriend about Linda. It was clear that the Linda had total control over her children's relationships. She chose not only who they could date but also who their friends would be. She managed Kevin's mobile phone, preventing him from talking to girls, and did the same with Christopher. The Kevins and Christopher personal lives were completely controlled. They didn't even have doors on their rooms. Even though they were grown men, they still had to rely on their mother's permission for everything. Since childhood, Linda has said that they owe her their lives for the violent events of 20 years ago. They truly believed that their father intended to harm them, which made them completely submissive to Linda's authority. The trial was ongoing, and its outcome was uncertain. The prosecution argued that the Kevin was trying to escape his mother's oppressive control. When Linda realized she was losing control, she grabbed a gun and attempted to kill Kevin. They presented strong evidence, including a video of Kevin in a hospital bed, where he claimed his mother shot him. However, Kevin refuted this claim, stating it stemmed from anger. While in court, Kevin appeared to take full responsibility for the incident. He admitted to threatening his mother, breaking down in tears and begging Linda for forgiveness. The prosecutor accused Linda of being completely controlling and manipulating her sons, but Kevin insisted that he was in charge and made his own decisions. He also admitted to using violence if his mother did not comply. However, this is hard to believe given the testimony of his former girlfriends, who reported that Linda did not allow her sons to pursue personal relationships and maintain tight control over their lives. Medical center staff supported the prosecution's account. They stated that Kevin was extremely agitated and appeared genuinely afraid that his mother was coming to kill him. All 4 nurses who examined him there reported that Kevin admitted that his mother had threatened and tried to kill him. Kevin was then called to testify again. The same events from Linda's first trial 20 years ago were repeated, raising suspicions that Kevin might be able to keep his mother out of jail again. However, this time, Kevin testified that the gun was pointed down when the shot was fired, contradicting his previous testimony to the prosecution. He later testified that the barrel was pointed up when he tried to take the gun away. Everyone noticed these inconsistencies in his testimony. Despite everything, Kevin still hoped that his mother would not go to jail. The prosecutor's office claimed that Kevin was biased because of his feelings for his mother, which they said affected his testimony. The jury returned a verdict in less than an hour. This time, the jury found Linda Cooney, 65, guilty of attempted murder. She was also convicted of assault with a deadly weapon, menacing, and stalking her son. At the final hearing where the verdict was announced, Bob, the brother of Jim, the first victim, spoke up. He stated that Linda had repeatedly harassed and threatened his family, ultimately taking away a loved one from them. He warned that if Linda was released from prison, those close to her would be in danger again. Kevin did not attend the sentencing but submitted a note stating that he took responsibility for these tragic events. In her defense, Linda stated that she had worked hard for years to provide for her children and meet their basic needs. However, she also believed that Kevin had inherited mental health issues from Jim, which contributed to his aggression that night. The court sentenced Linda Cooney to 40 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 13 years. Jim's family was unhappy with the sentence, believing it was unfair. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Lauren Heike. Lauren Heike was born on November 20, 1993, in Seattle, Washington, USA, into a wealthy family. Her father owned a plumbing company, and her mother worked in real estate. She was close with her brother, Ryan. She graduated from Silver Daily High School in Washington and then moved to Phoenix, Arizona, to study cosmetology and skin care. She began working at 18 and built a successful career. Her first job was as a customer service representative. In 2015, she became a leading manager at the well-known company Benefit, where she worked for 5 years. Afterward, she worked as a cosmetologist in a beauty salon for 9 months. In October 2020, she took a manager position at a center for aesthetic medicine. She planned to follow her mother's path in real estate and wanted to explore that field. At the time of the tragedy, she was working as a full-time instructor at a golf club. Lauren was never afraid of challenges and never got discouraged. She easily connected with new colleagues and was very responsible. She is actively involved in the fields of beauty, sports, and real estate. Everyone who knew her described her as bright, kind, and humorous. Lauren is in good health, plays sports regularly, and leads an active, healthy lifestyle. She has many good friends and spends most of her free time going out with them. She also loved to travel. Every day, after waking up, she has the habit of going for a walk. She found joy in even the simplest things, like a morning walk or a cup of coffee at breakfast. Tragically, Lauren's life ended at just 29 years old. Her loved ones are deeply saddened by her passing. On April 28, 2023, she started her day as usual. After waking up, she had coffee, spoke with family and friends on the phone, and prepared for a walk. Her route was that she passed through North Phoenix, near her apartment. As always, she intended to enjoy the fresh air and recharge for the day. This walk in the park is her favorite, as it gives her a path to reflect in quiet space. However, on that day, she didn't return home from her walk. Later, Lauren's colleagues and friends grew concerned when she didn't show up at work. This behavior is unlike her, as she usually lets others know if she is unwell and unable to go to work. She didn't call anyone, and she also didn't answer calls or messages from people. Her family also sensed something was wrong when she didn't contact them after the walk. This is unusual and worrying. Unable to reach her, relatives called the police and reported she missing. The police took the statement and went to Lauren's house to investigate. When the officers arrived at her house, she wasn't there. They looked through the windows but saw no one inside. Since she lived alone, there was no one to provide information about her daily routine. After checking the house, the officers found no signs of a break-in or anything suspicious. It seemed as if she had just left and never returned, possibly encountering trouble elsewhere. Lauren could not be reached, so police stepped up their search. They contacted all of her acquaintances, but no one had seen her that day. The search for Lauren began, and it wasn't long before she was found. The next day, April 29th, around 11 a.m., her body was discovered on her favorite walking path, the same one she had visited on the day she went missing. A resident of a nearby apartment complex, who was also her neighbor, out walking their dog, found her body. The dog led its owner to the location. The area was difficult to see clearly. Because of this, no passers-by discovered her body on the day of her death. Lauren, who often walked along this route with a neighbor, became a victim. The neighbor was shocked to find her and immediately called the police to report it. She described the body as having wounds that looked like knife stabs. The police quickly arrived, secured the scene, and forensic experts began searching for evidence. Authorities informed Lauren's family that her body might have been found and asked them to come for identification. Lauren's family identified her immediately. However, the official identification results were announced on May 1st. Her body was sent for an autopsy, and the forensic expert determined she was stabbed to death around 11 a.m. on April 28, 2023, the day she disappeared. The autopsy showed she had about 15 stab wounds, all on the upper body, with a deep stab in the back being fatal. The knife went in approximately 8 centimeters. Based on the wounds, the expert suggested that a penknife was used in the murder. Lauren fiercely fought for her life, which was evident from the multiple stab wounds on her hands, typical of defensive actions. There were also minor cuts and abrasions all over her body, showing her death was painful and prolonged. She attempted to defend herself and resist, but the attacker was more powerful. Furthermore, the surprise element of the attack may have played an important role, since she was suddenly attacked by a couple. While forensic experts were conducting the autopsy, the police continued to thoroughly investigate the murder scene. They discovered the reason for the numerous abrasions on Lauren's body. Along the path she had been walking, there was a barbed wire fence. It seems she attempted to crawl through it to escape, but couldn't succeed, resulting in her torn clothes and multiple abrasions and bruises. Additionally, at the crime scene, items were found that she had taken with her on her walk. Because the area where Lauren's body was found is near residential areas, so there was a high likelihood that both she and culprit were captured on surveillance cameras. The police obtained the necessary footage and thoroughly reviewed the incident of that morning. They discovered a video segment showing Lauren walking along a path around 10:52 a.m. She is calmly passing the area covered by the camera. About 22 seconds later, a tall, thin man dressed in a light t-shirt and dark shorts, carrying a backpack, is seen running behind her. However, he quickly vanished into the wooded area. A few minutes later, the same man from the recording exited the park and ran in the opposite direction. It was clear he was trying to cross the barbed wire fence, but quickly disappeared from the camera's view. No one else was present at the time, making him the main suspect in the case. Police reviewed security camera footage and identified the suspect, but ran into a major problem. The video quality was so poor, so it was impossible to identify the person's face or any features. The only clue was that he appeared to be a young black man. These recordings were shown on local television in hopes that someone could identify he. Several people have contacted the police with information. Although the information verification process took quite a while, no important clues were found. The police needed to analyze all Lauren's belongings found at the crime scene. Near the barbed wire fence, detectives discovered shoes. DNA analysis of her shoes revealed DNA that did not belong to her, likely belonging to the attacker. It was assumed that the attacker grabbed she by the leg, leaving his DNA behind. The sample was sent to the lab for further examination. After analyzing the results, the police uploaded the DNA test findings to their database. They found a match. The DNA belonged to 22-year-old Zion William Teasley, who had a previous criminal record. He had never held a steady job. A detailed review of his criminal history showed a series of convictions starting in 2020. However, the current charges were the most serious among his offenses. He had been involved in several assaults, burglaries, armed robberies, and minor acts of vandalism. In 2021, the police obtained his confession for the crimes he committed. In exchange, many of his intoxication charges, totaling about 10, were dismissed. He served 16 months in prison and was released in November 2022. The prosecutor's office encouraged him to cooperate with the investigation. Even though his DNA was on Lauren's shoes, that doesn't mean he's the killer. His DNA might have accidentally ended up on Lauren's shoes. This was not enough to arrest and charge he. More convincing evidence was needed. Therefore, detectives decided to examine his mobile phone. Officers tracked the location of Zion's mobile phone. The phone records showed it was in the area where Lauren was killed, at about the same time in the morning. Moreover, the route taken by Zion's phone matched exactly with the movements of the person seen on video. Doubts about Zion grew, but this evidence was not enough to convict him. So, the officers canvassed the area, questioning residents of nearby houses. They hoped to find people who knew the suspect and were able to identify him in the camera footage. Several local residents confirmed that the man in the video resembled Zion. Detectives consulted Zion's acquaintances, and they provided useful information. They revealed that he owned a penknife with a blade exactly 8 centimeters long, closely matching the weapon used in the murder. During the investigation, Zion remained placed on probation for a previous assault conviction. Just 5 days after Lauren's murder, he reported to the police department as required. Officers decided to speak with his probation officer. The officer mentioned that Zion appeared nervous during their last meet, as if he was anxious about something. When shown CCTV footage of the suspect, the probation officer said that the person resembled Zion in both physique and appearance and wore similar headphones. However, the officer couldn't be completely certain that the person on camera was the same as the one Zion. Soon after, the police decided to question Zion, the prime suspect. This meeting occurred on May 4th at his residence in Teasley, located on North Scottsdale Route, just a 5-minute walk from where Lauren was murdered. The police met Zion and asked him to come in for questioning. He agreed and accompanied them to the station, and he was shown CCTV footage of Lauren and suspect. During the interrogation, he became nervous, frequently changed his story. Initially, he claimed he had never seen Lauren. But he later insisted that he was not the person in the CCTV footage and denied any involvement in the murder. Police discovered contradiction in Zion's statement during the first interrogation. He confessed to the attack, but maintained that at the time, he was not aware of his actions. He explained that he had a difficult childhood, growing up in a poor family, where he was bullied. To survive, he resorted to stealing and eventually committed other crimes. The motives for the attack on Lauren, as well as some details, remain unknown and are being kept secret. After the attack, while the investigation was still ongoing, he went on the run and tried to hide his identity. He noticed that the news frequently covered the murder and showed surveillance footage. So, he decided to flee the city. However, he was arrested before he could escape. After Zion's arrest, police found a plane ticket to Detroit in his house, which supported his plan to escape. 6 days after the attack, the police capturing him. If he had fled to another state, it would have been much more challenging to catch and convict him. During their investigation, police uncovered issues with Zion's employment. They contacted the clothing store where he worked, but the manager revealed that he had been fired just days before the murder. The employer noted his aggressive behavior at work and suspected him of involvement in thefts from the store. This suspicion was confirmed by surveillance footage, showing he caught on camera with stolen items from the store. Consequently, he was terminated, although the store did not report him to the police. Zion was charged with first-degree murder on May 4, 2023. The prosecutor identified signs of premeditation in Lauren's murder and noted intentions of fleeing to another state. As a result, bail was set at $1 million, an amount he could not afford, leading to his continued imprisonment. Besides the murder charge, Zion faces accusations of violating terms related to placed on probation. Lauren's family expressed gratitude to Phoenix police for quickly apprehending an individual who posed a major threat to society, preventing further harm. They believe such dangerous individuals should be isolated permanently and have asked for life imprisonment. What do the injuries inflicted on Laura suggest? They show that there was no connection between her and Zion. They weren't acquainted, had no communication, and shared no mutual friends. Thus, Laura was in no way the one who made him aggressive, she just accidentally became the target of this evil person. If Zion is found guilty, he could face the death penalty. Arizona enforces the death sentence and is the only U.S. state that still uses gas chamber suffocation as a method of execution. Although this method is legally available in California, Missouri, and Wyoming, their gas chambers have been dismantled. Gas suffocation is considered inhumane because it causes a slow, terrifying, and painful death. The last person executed this way in Arizona was Walter Lagrand in 1999, who was convicted for murdering a bank manager. He suffered convulsions for 18 minutes in the gas chamber. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Rebecca Zahal. Rebecca Zahau was born on March 15, 1979, in Flam. She grew up in a large family. Rebecca's parents were devout Christians, and she was raised Protestant. Her family lived in Germany and Nepal for a while before moving to the United States in the early 2000s, settling in New York and California. Rebecca attracted the attention of many men, not only because of her looks, but also because of her charming personality. During her teenage years, Rebecca attended Cavalry Chapel Bible College in Austria, where she met Neil Nail Poi, a man from Arizona who was 13 years her senior. She fell deeply in love with him, and in 2002, they married when she was 23. They later moved to Phoenix, where Rebecca worked at an eye clinic. This couple's marriage had its ups and downs, lasting for 8 years before they divorced in 2011. During the breakup, Rebecca experienced significant turmoil. In 2009, she was arrested and pleaded guilty to shoplifting after stealing $1,000 worth of jewelry. She then began dating Jonah Ashanama, 54. Jonah is the chairman of a multi-million-dollar pharmaceutical company. He is the 9th highest-paid CEO in Arizona, earning more than $6 million a year. Rebecca first met Jonah while working as a technician at a Talmaloga, and they soon began dating. Their relationship became serious, although Rebecca was not yet divorced from Neil, and Jonah had been married twice before. His first marriage led to a 3-year custody battle over his 2 children. Jonah had a son, Maxwell Taryn, from his second marriage to Dina Romanoff in 2005. That marriage ended in divorce in 2010. After starting a relationship with Jonah, Rebecca quit her job at the eye clinic to spend more time with him and help care for the children. Rebecca lives in Jonah's massive mansion on Ocean Avenue in San Diego. However, Rebecca's life is not a fairy tale, and not everything is as it seems. The main issues stemmed from Jonah's 2 daughters from his first marriage, who did not get along with Rebecca. Their dislike for her became so intense that Rebecca considered either ending her relationship with Jonah. Despite this, Rebecca's biggest success was forming a strong bond with Jonah's youngest child, 6-year-old Maxwell. She cared for him like a mother, taking him to soccer practice, reading him bedtime stories, playing with him, and cooking for him as part of their daily routine. In July 2011, while Jonah was away on a business trip, tragedy struck. He believed his children were safe in Rebecca's care. Rebecca, along with younger sister visiting from Missouri, and Maxwell are both at home, each busy with their own activities. Everything seemed normal until Rebecca went into the bathroom. After a while, she was startled by a loud noise. Hurriedly dressing, Rebecca called out to Maxwell and younger sister, hoping for a response, but received no response. When she leaned over the railing, she found a horrifying sight. Maxwell was lying face down on the floor next to a fallen chandelier, surrounded by a pool of blood. Rebecca's younger sister, Zena, called 911 after Maxwell fell from the 2nd floor. When paramedics arrived, they rushed him to the children's hospital. Maxwell had fallen over the railing and hit his head on a chandelier. He landed face down and suffered serious injuries to his face and spinal cord, causing his heart to stop and cutting off oxygen to his brain. Doctors attempted to help Maxwell breathe, but unfortunately, the boy was deprived of oxygen for nearly 30 minutes, resulting in irreversible brain damage. Tragically, the Maxwell died 5 days later. Police investigated the incident and on July 26, concluded that Maxwell's death was an accident. Maxwell ran away down the upstairs hallway. Before he could stop himself, he fell over the 2nd floor railing. In an attempt to catch himself, he tried to grab the chandelier but instead hit the stairs railing on the way down. He landed hard on the floor. It seemed like a tragic accident, and many accepted it as such. Now, let's go back to July 12, 2011, the day after Maxwell's accident. Rebecca took her sister Zena to the airport and then picked up Jonah's brother Adam, who flew in from Tennessee. Meanwhile, Maxwell was still in the intensive care unit. Jonah then visited his son at the hospital while Rebecca and Adam stayed at the mansion. Adam stayed in a guest house on the sprawling estate, while Rebecca stayed alone in the mansion. Details of that evening are unclear, but neighbors reported loud music coming from the house throughout the night. The next morning, around 6:45 a.m., Adam awoke to a horrifying scene on the mansion's balcony. Rebecca's body was hanging there, with her hands tied behind her back and her ankles bound with red rope. A long-sleeved t-shirt was wrapped around her head. Adam quickly called 911. When asked about the girl's condition, Adam said he didn't know. Adam then cut the rope and tried to resuscitate her while waiting for the ambulance, but it was too late. 2 days after Maxwell's tragic death, Rebecca also died. The San Diego Sheriff's Department quickly began an investigation. In Rebecca's room, they discovered a red rope tied to the foot of the bed, extending out onto the balcony. What stood out, however, was a book on magic lying on the bed, with drawings of women with their hands tied behind their backs. The Rebecca's DNA was discovered on the knots of the rope and on the kitchen knife she used to cut the rope. Additionally, black paint stains were found on Rebecca's hands and the rope. There were no DNA or fingerprint traces from any unknown person. An autopsy conducted by the San Diego Medical Examiner revealed that Rebecca had sustained a traumatic brain injury. Several months later, on September 2, 2011, the Sheriff's Department officially concluded that Rebecca Zahau had taken her own life out of guilt related to Maxwell's tragic accident that had occurred just 2 days earlier. To back up these claims, police shared detailed findings, including demonstrating how Rebecca was able to tie herself up. According to them, the story begins with a late-night call from Adam, informing Rebecca that Maxwell was in critical condition and might not survive. Shortly before 1 a.m. on July 13, Rebecca began to execute her plan. She undressed and tied one end of a rope to the foot of her bed, then fashioned a noose with the other end. Afterward, she went out onto the balcony with the rope, tied her ankles together, and secured her hands behind her back with it. Ultimately, she leaned forward over the edge of the balcony and fell 9 feet. Rebecca lost consciousness within 15 seconds and died approximately 20 minutes later. Police reported that it was clear Rebecca died as a result of her own actions and by her own choice. Rebecca's family refused to accept the police explanation for her death. They were convinced that it was murder. Rebecca's family, including her first husband Neil, never thought she would intentionally harm herself. Just the day before her death, Rebecca had spoken to her sister Mary, in which she showed no signs of depression. While Rebecca expressed sadness about Maxwell, she assured her sister that she had no intention of taking drastic action. Additionally, Rebecca had strong religious beliefs and a deep love for her family. It is hard to believe that she would consider such an act. The Rebecca was buried on July 27, 2011, in St. Joseph, Missouri, but the fight for justice for Rebecca's family was just beginning. They publicly expressed doubts about the police findings, believing that the police was rushed. Determined to prove that Rebecca was murdered, they hired their own police and lawyers. The family also sought legal representation and pushed to have the case reopened. Upon reopening the case, they presented several compelling points. First, forensic evidence suggested that Rebecca may have suffered a head injury, but the medical examiner dismissed this claim without strong justification. Additionally, the police did not obtain information from Adam's mobile phone or review his messages to Rebecca on the night of her death. At the family's request, pathologist Dr. Cyril Wedge conducted a second examination of the body. He concluded that the fractures in Rebecca's throat were indicative of manual strangulation, suggesting that she may not have died by her own hand. During the department's investigation, several pieces of information were uncovered, including evidence that Rebecca had been abused before her death. Rebecca's family identified a prime suspect, Adam Shacknai. In February 2018, Rebecca's relatives filed a $10 million wrongful death lawsuit. Adam was accused of conspiring with Maxwell's mother, Dina, and her twin sister, Nina, to kill Rebecca out of revenge. They blamed Rebecca for Maxwell's accident while he was in her care. It was revealed that shortly after Maxwell's accident, around 11 p.m., Nina called Rebecca to discuss the incident. Rebecca did not answer, and surveillance camera footage showed Dina and Nina at the hospital that night when Rebecca died, leading to the sisters being cleared of any involvement. Rebecca's family's attorney accused Adam of assaulting Rebecca. The attorney also accused Adam of raping Rebecca and strangling her, then orchestrating her death. In response, Adam's defense attorney argued that there was no evidence linking him to Rebecca's death. He pointed out that Rebecca's fingerprints and DNA were found on the knife and rope used. A civil trial then took place in April 2018, lasting a month. During the trial, the jury found Adam liable for Rebecca's death. As a result, he was ordered to pay $5.2 million to Rebecca's family for their pain and suffering. Since this was a civil trial, a unanimous decision was not required. Adam did not face any criminal charges, so he could not be sentenced to prison, even though he was convicted. In December 2018, the San Diego Sheriff's Department confirmed that it would not overturn the original verdicts in the case. Civil verdicts can be appealed, and in February 2019, Adam appealed the civil court decision, arguing that there were procedural errors and misconduct among the jurors. Adam then reached a settlement that dismissed the civil lawsuit and reduced the original $5 million settlement to $2 million. Adam was furious about the settlement, claiming that it had been made without his consent. He criticized the judge for being incompetent in granting the settlement without his or his attorney's input. In response, the judge declaring that the civil lawsuit was now over. The jury's verdict in civil court found Adam Shacknai guilty of murdering Rebecca Zahau, and the verdict remains unchanged. However, Rebecca's family is determined to pursue further justice. They have vowed to continue their efforts until Adam is brought to justice. In August 2019, they announced a $100,000 reward for anyone who can provide information about the events surrounding Rebecca's death. Their attorney stated that it is important to gather all possible evidence and urged the sheriff to reopen the investigation immediately. The family is determined to fight the injustice Rebecca faced and will not give up. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Zara Alina. Zara was born in the UK in the winter of 1986. She was the first of 5 children born to a young single mother who lived with her own parents. The family had immigrated from Pakistan in 1968. Zara grew up in a close-knit, multi-generational household. Although they didn't have much money, her family placed a strong emphasis on education and was committed to ensuring Zara had everything she needed to lead a fulfilling life, including love, support, and a good education. During her childhood, Zara enjoyed dancing and swimming. She aspired to become a lawyer. She had a friendly nature and a cheerful spirit. As a teenager, she had the opportunity to travel around England and visit museums and galleries. These experiences expanded to trips throughout Europe. After graduating from high school, Zara enrolled in law school at the University of Westminster. She showed a passionate and determined spirit. Her commitment to justice was evident in the auditorium, where she actively supported refugees fleeing violence. She also volunteered at soup kitchens for the homeless. Those who knew Zara said she left a trail of joy wherever she went. She was also very hardworking and managed to cover all her own expenses. In fact, she worked as a salesperson at a local clothing store and was well acquainted with everyone in the area, from teenagers to seniors. She greeted everyone with kindness and was always willing to help. Sometimes, she uses her money to take stray cats to the vet, care for them at home, and encourage neighbors to adopt them. An important person in Zara's life is her friend Cassie Peters. They visit each other regularly or talk on the phone almost every day. By 2002, after passing her exams and completing her first year, Zara was offered a job at the Crown Prosecution Service. This was a crucial step towards becoming a fully fledged solicitor, a goal she was determined to achieve. On her first day, she took a cheerful selfie and sent it to friends and family. At 35, Zara got a new job, which further strengthened her confidence in her plans to start a family soon. Near her home lived a man named Jordan McSweeney. Jordan was several years younger than her. At the age of 13, he had already faced charges in a youth court in Kent for various offenses committed between 2006 and 2009. In August 2010, when he was 17, he was convicted of assaulting a girl, which resulted in her having a swollen eye. For this, he received a 4-month community service order. 11 years later, he assaulted another woman and was given a 3-year community service order. By the start of the 2020s, Jordan was 28 years old. Jordan has a troubling history, with convictions for 9 offenses, including theft, assaulting police and the public, vehicle theft, traffic violations, committing crimes while out on bail, and shoplifting. On his profile on a popular social media platform, he boasted about owning many knives and promoted his criminal lifestyle through photos and quotes. He even shared fake wanted posters claiming he was being sought by the FBI. After serving time for criminal damage, racially aggravated stalking, and illegal possession of a knife, he was released on June 17, 2022. After his release, Jordan violated all terms of his agreement and missed 2 consecutive appointments with his probation officer. As a result, police revoked his benefits and began the process of revoking his parole, with the intention of sending him back to prison on June 22, 2022. 2 days later, on June 25, police went to Jordan's mother's house to arrest him but found he was not there. That night, Zara had planned to meet a friend, after speaking to her aunt on the phone and mentioning her plans to go out. Her aunt advised her to stay safe, but Zara reassured herself that she would not be going far from home and felt confident in the safety of the route she was taking, as she was very familiar with the area. Zara then met her friend at a local bar called the Big Spoon in Ilford, a vibrant and diverse area in London's West End, ideal for dinner and conversation. The girls went to the bar before going to another nearby venue. In the bar, Zara only drinks water, not alcohol. By this time, Jordan had had several drinks at other nightclubs. He had a disturbing idea in mind and was determined to carry it out. He planned to find a woman to attack that night. Surveillance footage captured him at the bar entrance, where he was seen hugging women without their consent and trying to kiss them. He was particularly aggressive towards one of the staff, despite her clearly feeling uncomfortable, and he was eventually kicked out of the bar after 11 p.m. His inappropriate behavior was recorded by security cameras as he left. While walking along Fort Street towards the park, he noticed a woman hurrying by and began to follow her closely. Despite her attempts to evade him, he was outside waiting when she entered a store. After she carefully exited, Jordan trailed her again. However, when the woman finally entered her home, Jordan had to move on. At around 2 a.m., when the streets were fairly deserted, Jordan saw another woman walking. Surveillance footage shows him quickly approaching her, but 2 passers-by noticed something was wrong and helped the woman get home safely. Meanwhile, Zara and her friend decided to leave the bar at 2 a.m. The friend took a taxi, but Zara, thinking the distance was short and the weather was nice, opted to walk. She headed to Cranbrook Street, which was well lit and about a 10-minute walk from her home. It was then that Jordan spotted her. Jordan followed Zara for approximately 800 meters before seizing her. He approached her from behind, covered her mouth with one hand, and started to strangle her with the other before dragging her into a wooded path. There, he sexually assaulted and violently beat her. Jordan then returned home at around 2:30 a.m. On June 26, 2022, Zara was found on the pavement in Ilford, with her belongings scattered along the pavement. She was brutally beaten, partially stripped of her clothes and lying on the side of the road. A passerby performed CPR until an ambulance arrived, but sadly, Zara died in hospital at 9:58 a.m. on Sunday. During this time, Jordan was captured on the park's security camera. Police visited Zara's grandmother to ask her to identify her granddaughter in the bar's security camera footage. After she confirmed it was Zara, police explained to her what had happened. Later, the police conducted a thorough investigation in the area where Zara was found, collecting surveillance camera footage to track the movements of her attacker. This investigation, along with bloody fingerprints found near the scene, led them to identify Jordan as the suspect. They tracked his location using surveillance cameras and obtained images of the prime suspect. Police then arrested Jordan as he slept in his trailer. He did not resist arrest. Inside his trailer, police found blood-stained clothing and shoes. Despite hours of questioning, he remained silent. The crime prompted probation officer Justin Russell to point out several mistakes the probation department made in handling Jordan's case. He noted that Jordan had been a felon for 16 years, both in prison and after his release, which classified him as a dangerous offender. However, he did not receive the appropriate level of supervision. Had more drastic measures been taken, he could have been sent back to prison after missing scheduled meetings with his probation officer. September 30th was set for the trial, but it was postponed. Zara's family then held a vigil in her memory, along the route she was supposed to take home, symbolizing her unfinished journey. Many people dressed in white to attend the vigil. The event was attended by more than 120 organizations dedicated to women's rights and the fight against violence. During a preliminary hearing at East London Crown Court, forensic scientist Nadia Perso said that local police could have done more to locate Jordan before he attacked Zara. Nadia believed that the case deserved more media attention and suggested that the inquest should also consider the actions of prison staff and probation officers. Nadia estimated that the inquest would take about a month. On November 16, 2022, Jordan did not attend the hearing, despite being told he needed to attend via video link. However, he later pleaded guilty. Prosecutor Oliver Glasgow described him as unfit for bail, a view supported by Judge Chima Grove. Sentencing was adjourned until December 14, 2022. Jordan McSweeney was sentenced to 33 years in prison for the murder of Zara Alina. Jordan and his representatives appealed the verdict, but the sentence was upheld at 33 years. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Kimberly Proctor. Kimberly Proctor was born on January 1, 1992, in Langford, Canada. She came from a middle-class family. Her mother, Lucia, was a manager at Walmart, and her father, Fred, was a mechanic. Kimberly was known for her kind and loving nature, especially towards animals. She had several pets at home, including lizards, rabbits, mice, but her greatest love was for cats. Unfortunately, her fondness for cats led to years of bullying at school, where she often wore small cat ears, and this harassment continued for a long time. According to her mother, Kimberly faced bullying for most of her life. Kimberly's situation became more difficult when she was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, which made her more vulnerable to teasing. She began having panic attacks at school. As a result, her parents chose to enroll Kimberly in a different school. This school catered to young people with a variety of problems, including some who had been expelled from other schools for misbehavior. One of her classmates was Cruz Elwood, a boy who faced many challenges. Cruz lived with his mother. His father had been in prison since 2001 after being sentenced to 15 years for abusing and murdering a young girl. Cruz later admitted that he knew about his father's actions but did not want to talk about it. Despite his young age, Cruz was involved in drugs and had a history of stealing money from mailboxes. People who knew him described him as very intelligent. Another troubled student at the school was Cameron Moffat, a friend of Cruz's who was diagnosed with PTSD after being abused when he was 4 years old. Cameron had a difficult relationship with his parents, and neither medication nor counseling seemed to help. He often resisted treatment and began self-harming to cope with his anxiety. His aggressive behavior was evident both at home and at school, where he sometimes carried a knife. Cruz and Cameron met in the 5th grade and quickly became best friends. They did everything together, from skipping school to smoking marijuana. They also loved playing the computer game Warcraft and occasionally visited adult websites. Although their behavior at school was unpredictable, they were not seen as a serious threat. In February 2008, Cruz wrote a blog post about warning signs of a serial killer, listing common traits like cruelty to animals, a fascination with fire, parental abandonment, and a strong interest in violence. He pointed out that he fulfilled all 14 of the criteria he mentioned. By 2009, Kimberly had joined Cruz and Cameron's group, and they began to do everything together. When they weren't hanging out outside, they spent hours texting and chatting. During this time, Kimberly started dating Zach, who was friends with Cruz and Cameron. However, their relationship only lasted a couple of months before Zach decided to break up with her. This breakup upset Kimberly deeply, and she turned to her friends for support, spending long hours chatting online. During one of these conversations, Cameron revealed to Kimberly that he had feelings for her and thought she was beautiful. Kimberly appreciated the compliment but was only interested in Cruz, with whom she had grown closer after her breakup with Zach. Kimberly and Cruz began sharing their most private thoughts online, including secrets they had never revealed to anyone else. Kimberly opened up to Cruz about her honest feelings about her weight and height, and Cruz reassured her that she was beautiful just the way she was. However, Cruz and Cameron's lives began to take a dark and sinister turn. They began drinking blood and bodily fluids to see how they would feel. Cameron's friends said that he would sometimes lash out at his family and yell at his mother, while Cruz became increasingly aggressive toward his mother and defied any restrictions placed on him. Both boys began to have disturbing fantasies about being restrained and abused, leading them to explore adult websites with violent themes. Their discussions with Kimberly became increasingly disturbing. One day, Cameron made an innuendo-filled remark to Kimberly that upset her. When she shared this with Cruz, he responded by making the same suggestion. When Kimberly refused, Cruz threatened her ominously, saying, "Death is coming for you, and you will soon be dead." He then asked her about her plans for the next day. Cruz expressed interest in meeting her to discuss why some people were treating her so badly and other personal issues. They eventually agreed to call and meet the next day. She had no idea that Cruz had already contacted Cameron and they were exchanging messages about Kimberly. In Cameron and Cruz's conversation before the terrible events, they mentioned that they should proceed with their plan, saying that they have to be careful and that it will be interesting. They expressed their desire to do it immediately instead of waiting, saying that they will not harm her right away and can keep her alive but tied up. Later, Cameron and Cruz decide on a specific phrase to signal when to act to harm Kimberly. Cruz also suggests that they meet at the Ford bus stop at 10 o'clock. 18-year-old Kimberly accidentally found herself in a dangerous situation. That morning, Kimberly was still in bed while her mother, Lucia, prepared to leave for work. Before leaving, Lucia kissed Kimberly and expressed her love for her. Since Kimberly had no classes that day, her mother thought she would sleep in, especially since her only commitment was babysitting at 3 p.m. They had planned to start sewing Kimberly's prom dress together when Lucia returned home. However, Lucia was unaware that Kimberly had other plans. She had arranged to meet Cameron and Cruz at the bus station around 10:30 a.m. Kimberly got off the bus at the stop where her friends were waiting. Just minutes earlier, Cameron and Cruz had bought a can of gasoline as part of their terrifying plan. The three friends chatted for a while before heading to Cruz's house in Bali. Up until this point, everything seemed normal to Kimberly, and she had no idea of the terrifying situation her friends had planned for her. When they arrived at the house, Cruz used a code word to signal Cameron, and almost immediately, both attacked Kimberly, beating and kicking her. They bound her feet and ankles, stuffed a sock in her mouth, and taped it shut. Cameron and Cruz violently assaulted Kimberly for hours, ultimately causing her death by suffocation. Afterward, they desecrated her body in horrific ways, mutilating her and placing various items in her genital area, before storing her in a freezer in Cruz's garage. Cruz attempted to cover his tracks and establish an alibi by sending her a message from his computer. In this message, he pretended to be far away and asked her if she had completed her work as a nanny, claiming he needed her advice. Cameron and Cruz's actions were extremely disturbing, and they treated it as a game. That same night, after committing the horrific act, Cruz texted his girlfriend, asking her to come out of the house to meet him. Fortunately, she refused, which may have saved her life. The next morning, Cameron and Cruz placed Kimberly's body in a hockey bag and calmly took a bus to a remote forested area. There, they doused the bag with gasoline and set it on fire. During this time, Cruz made the mistake of using his cell phone to send a message. Meanwhile, Kimberly's parents and relatives were in a state of panic, unaware of her whereabouts. Her mother, Lucia, had tried to call Kimberly the day before, but when her calls went directly to voicemail, she sensed something was wrong. Lucia went to the police station to report Kimberly missing, and the search for Kimberly quickly began. After causing Kimberly's death, both Cruz and Cameron continued their lives as if nothing had happened. Cruz spent the day at home with his girlfriend, while Cameron had lunch with his mother and grandmother. Then they took him to buy a new video game. That night, a young man who was hanging out with friends discovered charred body under a bridge. The body was burned beyond recognition. The body was later identified through dental records and was that of Kimberly. The tragic news devastated Kimberly's family and friends. Police arrived to investigate the crime scene. At the time, police had no leads to identify anyone responsible for this horrific crime. Kimberly's family and friends reported that she had no known conflicts with anyone and were puzzled as to who could have harmed her. In her memory, the family created a Facebook page, which police are closely monitoring in the hopes of uncovering any clues. They are also keeping a close eye on all of Kimberly's acquaintances. The story of the horrific incident shocked Canada, and every media outlet covered it. At the time, Cruz was eager to share his dark exploit with someone he trusted. He decided to use the in-game chat feature, believing that chat records were unlikely to be kept or checked. On March 23, 5 days after the murder, Cruz messaged a young girl from Halifax, urging her to read something important. He then sent her links to news articles about the incident to prove that he was telling the truth. The girl was horrified by what Cruz revealed but reacted the way he wanted, assuring him that she would always support him, no matter what his actions were. Cruz replied that that's why he trusted her, and he would repay her trust, no matter what. Suddenly, Cameron joined the conversation and backed up Cruz's account. The girl asked Cameron if he had any thoughts about Kimberly's family and friends and the lives he had impacted. Cameron simply replied that he felt no remorse for any of that. The young girl wrote to Cruz again, asking him not to repeat his previous actions. He promised he wouldn't. As time went on, the Cameron and Cruz their lives as if nothing had happened, but they kept a close eye on the investigation's progress. Their online chats and text messages mostly revolved around updates related to the case. Cruz confided to a friend that his father had advised him not to answer questions at school. This advice may have stemmed from his father's suspicion that Cruz was involved in Kimberly's death or knew who was responsible. An incident later occurred involving Samantha, one of Kimberly's close friends, who overheard Cruz making negative comments about Kimberly. Samantha asked him to stop, explaining that it still hurt her to hear such things so soon after Kimberly's death. In response, Cruz yelled that he did not care about Kimberly's death. Another student even reported hearing Cruz say that he was glad Kimberly was dead because he did not like her. At that point, police began investigating Cameron and Cruz, leading to their questioning. Both admitted to seeing Kimberly on the morning she went missing, but said they didn't spend much time with her because she had to go to school. Police began monitoring Cameron and Cruz's online activities. Police obtained a warrant to install wiretaps in their home and both were placed under close surveillance. Their cell phones were also tapped and investigations into their devices were conducted. Disturbing evidence was discovered, including text messages exchanged between them in online chats. Police seized numerous documents related to their activities. Police believe Cruz and Cameron were responsible for Kimberly's death. Cameron and Cruz were then arrested and charged with Kimberly's murder. Both appeared calm and unresponsive. Cruz remained silent throughout the interrogation. Cameron, on the other hand, repeatedly taunted the police and refused to provide any information. He eventually confessed to his crimes in a cold manner. After Cameron's confession, Cruz was forced to admit everything. They both later pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and destruction of human remains. A year after the events of 2011, Cameron and Cruz appeared at their trial, appearing calm and talking animatedly to each other about the questions they were being questioned about. Throughout the hearing, they remained calm and unflinching. A psychological evaluation found that Cruz displayed characteristics of a rapist that were rare for his age and was at high risk of committing violent acts again. He was also diagnosed with clinical psychopathy. The psychiatrist indicated that Cruz would require intensive and prolonged supervision for at least the next 10 years. Cameron had a high rate of reoffending and serious mental health issues. During the hearing, the judge needed to decide whether to try both young men as adults and transfer them to an adult prison or to treat them as juveniles. It's important to note that the defense requested they be tried as adults, believing this would provide the boys with better educational and rehabilitation opportunities. Only Kimberly's parents were focused on seeking the death penalty for the Cameron and Cruz. However, Canada does not have a death penalty. If the young men are tried as adults, they would face life imprisonment, with the possibility of parole after serving 25 years. If Cruz and Cameron had been tried as juveniles, the maximum sentence they would have faced would have been 6 years, along with 4 years of community service. Cameron Moffat and Cruz Wellwood were then sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of appealing for bail after only 10 years. Kimberly's family has expressed their anger at the lenient sentence. Kimberly's father, Fred, expressed concern that Cameron and Cruz might continue their harmful behavior and that this was unacceptable. Fred pointed out that both had confessed to their actions but showed no remorse, which he believed justified their lifelong detention. Meanwhile, Pacific High School, which Kimberly and the two killers attended, has established a protocol for dealing with threats of violence. The protocol would allow police, schools, and social services to exchange information about students who might pose a threat in order to prevent tragic consequences. When asked why they had treated Kimberly's body that way, Cruz mentioned that for him, it was about finding the satisfaction he craved. And he felt a sense of power in taking someone's life. He shared that his life until then had felt empty and pointless, and this act gave him a sense of fulfillment. Cruz's first petition for parole was set for June 2019 but was postponed to August. The psychological evaluation conducted at that time was nearly identical to the initial assessment, indicating that Cruz was still completely unfit for parole. Consequently, the specialist did not recommend granting him release in 2020. His appeal was denied once more, meaning Cruz will have to wait until 2025 for another chance at parole. Sometimes people get a second chance, but this case should not have been given a second chance. It was clear that there was a deliberate intention to commit a terrible act. Individuals like Cameron and Cruz acted out their darkest fantasies without remorse. In fact, it was revealed that Kimberly was just one of 3 victims they targeted. Given the nature of their actions and the psychiatric evaluations, it is clear that Cameron and Cruz should not be allowed to live freely in society. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Hannah Payne. On the evening of May 7, 2019, a major traffic jam occurred on the road near Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport in Atlanta, Georgia. At the same time, a truck carrying batteries caught fire on nearby I-285, causing several access points to be closed. This caused frustration and anger among many motorists. Terry Robinson, a correctional officer in Georgia who was off duty, was driving on Clark Howell Highway when he saw a red pickup truck run a red light. The truck nearly collided with a black SUV before crashing straight into a semi-truck. The semi-truck driver, Stanley Kimball, managed to escape his cab without injury, as did the SUV driver, Hannah Payne, who was unhurt and pulled over to the side of the road. Terry and 21-year-old Hannah both called 911 to report the accident. After the crash, Kenneth's pickup truck began to smoke from a fuel leak, and he initially appeared uninjured. He got out of the truck and walked around it, presumably trying to assess the damage. After waiting 20 minutes without seeing the police arrive, Terry became concerned about Kenneth's actions. Despite the significant damage to his truck, Kenneth was able to start it and drive away from the scene. Terry then asked Hannah to take a photo of Kenneth's truck's license plate. Hannah Payne, the young driver of the SUV, quickly got behind the wheel and pursued Kenneth. While driving, she called 911 again to report that the man involved in the accident might be drunk. She mentioned her intention to catch up with him to take a picture of his license plate. The police urged her to stop the chase and put her safety first, but Hannah was determined to follow him. She caught up with Kenneth and gave the police his car details. Despite this, she continued the chase, telling the police that she could not let a drunk driver cause another accident and refused to return to the scene of the original accident. Hannah then parked her SUV on the street at the intersection of Forest Peak and Road, about a mile from the accident site. After stopping the car, Hannah got out and walked toward Kenneth's pickup truck. She approached the driver's side door while recording their conversation on her phone. During their argument, her phone fell to the ground. In a moment of extreme tension, Hannah pulled out her registered handgun and shot Kenneth. She then picked up the phone and called 911 again, claiming that Kenneth pulled the trigger while she was holding the gun. She asked the police to come quickly. Police Ritchie of the Clayton County Sheriff's Department arrived on the scene and heard bystanders shouting that a woman next to an SUV had just shot a man during an argument. Hannah's black shirt was torn, and she changed into a pink hoodie while waiting for police. She quickly handed her gun to the police while they attempted to pull Kenneth out of the car and administer first aid. Hannah began talking to witnesses to their fight, hoping they would stay and tell police that Kenneth had attacked her and opened fire. Kenneth was rushed to hospital by ambulance, but sadly he could not be saved. Meanwhile, Hannah was placed in the back seat of a police car. Police then began investigating the incident on the busy rush-hour road. Many witnesses saw what happened from different angles, and they provided the police with the information they needed. Hannah was quick to share her account of how the shot was fired. Hannah had been working in property management since graduating high school. Her job involved leasing properties, showing them to potential tenants, and collecting rent. In this role, she frequently met with strangers, sometimes in vacant buildings, and often handled large amounts of cash. This was her rationale for carrying a gun. In Georgia, residents can obtain a permit to carry a firearm only at the age of 21, which Hannah was at the time of the incident. Kenneth was 62 years old when he was killed. The truck he was driving belonged to his father. And inside, police discovered various tools and items he used as a mechanic. Police also found a set of needles and syringes for injecting insulin, which was crucial since witness accounts suggested he might have had diabetes or was experiencing insulin shock. The Clayton County Medical Examiner could not determine Kenneth's blood sugar level at the time of the accident because it naturally decreases after death. However, key witness Terry Robinson, who worked at a state medical facility, told the police that Kenneth was acting like a diabetic. Terry did not think Kenneth was drunk, but was convinced that Kenneth was diabetic and needed urgent medical attention. Kenneth's wife, Christine, later supported this diagnosis, saying she believed he had suffered an acute diabetic attack and may have been trying to drive himself to Southern Regional Medical Center when the accident occurred. She asserted that her husband would not have simply left the scene and was actually trying to get to the hospital. A few hours after the incident, Hannah spoke with police from Clayton County. She recounted the accident on Clark Hole Highway that led her to chase the suspect. Hannah explained that she had approached Kenneth to persuade him to go back to the scene of the accident, following the instructions from the 911 dispatcher. When he crossed into oncoming traffic to turn right, she saw a chance to make him stop. Hannah mentioned that she walked towards him while holding her cell phone, telling him she was currently on the line with police. At that moment, her phone fell to the ground. He then grabbed her shirt and ripped it off. Kenneth said he had something for her, which scared Hannah. In response, she pulled out a gun and threatened him. This made the situation worse, and at one point Kenneth tried to knock the gun out of her hand, leading to a struggle. Hannah reported that the gun moved, sometimes pointing the barrel at her and sometimes at Kenneth. Then, a shot was fired. Hannah told the police that she did not remember whether she had her finger on the trigger during the struggle and continued to insist that it was Kenneth who fired the shot. The gun had a double safety feature. First, the user needed to squeeze the handle to activate a switch on top of the weapon, and only then could they put their finger on the trigger to fire. Hannah mentioned that she didn't put her finger on the trigger because she was aware of how the safety worked. She believes that during the struggle, the gun may have spun, allowing anyone to release the safety catch and pull the trigger. Tiana McKinney, a witness, was driving a coworker home at the time. They saw Hannah's SUV. After noticing that the SUV had cut off Kenneth's pickup truck in the opposite lane, leading to a heated argument, she called 911. Tiana's account contradicts Hannah's story. She said that Hannah cut off Kenneth's truck, then Hannah got out of her SUV, pulled out a gun, and threatened him. Tiana wasn't the only one who noticed Hannah was the attacker. Cameron Williams captured a short video of the confrontation between Hannah and Kenneth. The video shows Hannah holding the gun, walking away from her car, and then bending down to the ground. Cameron thought that Hannah was bending down to pick up her dropped phone at that moment. Clayton County Police documented her injuries. After questioning her, they discovered scratches on the back of Hannah's neck where she said Kenneth grabbed her and pulled her forward. There was also a red, swollen area on her right wrist where Kenneth allegedly grabbed her. Hannah also mentioned a bruise on her lip, and her hand also appeared to be injured. While waiting for the police at the station, Hannah nervously bit her fingernails, claiming that they had broken during the struggle. When the police searched the car, they found several items that could support Hannah's claim that Kenneth had reached for a weapon inside. Among the clutter in the car, they found a flashlight and, most notably, a knife. However, only Hannah accused Kenneth of trying to get something to harm her, raising doubts about the reliability of her testimony. As a result, an arrest warrant was issued for Hannah Payne, which includes charges of murder, aggravated assault, and false imprisonment for Hannah stopping Kenneth's truck and pointing a gun at it. She also faces a charge of possession of a weapon during the commission of a crime, which could result in a life sentence with an additional 10 years in prison. Hannah's attorney, Matt Tucker, described Hannah as a good and responsible citizen. He argued that she pulled the gun to protect her life. Furthermore, he said that the state intentionally altered 911 recordings from the incident to remove portions of the audio that could support Hannah's testimony. Hannah was eventually granted bail and placed under house arrest, where she wore an ankle monitor and had a curfew of 9 p.m. Her release on bail upset the Kenneth family and many others who believed her actions were racially motivated. The case received widespread media coverage because it involved a white woman who shot a black man and was granted bail twice. Hannah's family later gave an interview, criticizing how the media portrayed her as someone very different from who she truly is. Hannah's parents expressed their condolences to the family of the Kenneth, while emphasizing that Hannah is a kind person who treats everyone equally, without regard for race or other differences. Hannah's trial was postponed first to 2020 and then to 2021. Even after 3 years, the trial has yet to take place. Kenneth's brother, Keith, contacted an organization that addresses issues of racism, seeking support. In his letter, he described Hannah as a cold-blooded criminal who refused to provide timely medical help to his brother, leading to his death. The accusation quickly went viral on social media. By spring 2022, Hannah remained under house arrest, and her trial date had not been established. During this time, the NAACP released a statement expressing deep concern about the slow progress of the case and urged for a quick resolution. A trial date was eventually scheduled for later that year. But the case experienced an unusual delay when defense attorney Matt Tucker did not show up in court. The judge remarked that this was not the first time she had issues with this lawyer, so she canceled the hearing and announced her intention to file a complaint against him with the Bar Association. Matt Tucker later informed the court that he was unable to attend the hearing due to having suffered a stroke and being hospitalized. In December 2023, nearly 4 years after Kenneth's murder, the much-anticipated hearing finally occurred. Clayton County Prosecutor Bonnie Smith presented evidence about the day of the shooting. Witnesses who were present at the scene also shared their accounts of that day. Since the incident unfolded rapidly, their testimonies varied and sometimes conflicted. One witness claimed that Hannah drew a gun as soon as she exited her car, while others asserted she only did so after she and Kenneth had already begun arguing. Despite these inconsistencies, the witnesses agreed on key details. Describing Hannah's approach to Kenneth's car as aggressive and noting that they witnessed her striking Kenneth. Hannah's claim of self-defense would not have been valid if the jury determined that she was the attacker and did not attempt to defuse the situation. Medical experts concluded that Kenneth died from a single gunshot wound to the abdomen, with no other injuries to the body. During the trial, Hannah defended herself by explaining that she believed she was following proper procedure when Terry Robinson, the main witness to the first incident, asked her to take a photo of Kenneth's license plate. Terry stated that he did not instruct Hannah to follow Kenneth. However, Hannah reported that she observed Terry waving his hand at her multiple times, as if signaling her to follow Kenneth's car and photograph his license plates. Witnesses described Hannah's driving as aggressive, noting that she nearly collided with another vehicle during the pursuit and created a dangerous situation by stopping in front of a red pickup truck. After the incident, Hannah shared with the jury a story similar to what she told the police. She said that when she approached Kenneth to ask him to return to the scene of the original accident, he grabbed her and refused to let go. She emphasized that the moment Kenneth hit the gas and crashed into her car, she felt extremely scared. The prosecution asked why Hannah ignored police instructions to stop chasing Kenneth and return to the scene of the original accident. Hannah replied that she could not remember that moment because it had happened 4 years ago. The prosecution reiterated that Kenneth did not know Hannah and was not obliged to follow her directives. After reviewing all the evidence, the jury took about 2 hours to deliberate and subsequently found Hannah Payne guilty of all charges, including premeditated murder. Hannah was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 43 years.